So the debate doesn't start for like another 30 minutes. I'm finishing up editing a video here, and then I've got to test. So Rob also uses Restream like I do, and we're trying to figure out a way to have this debate without him losing his chat, me losing my chat. He uses Discord, so I'm going to have to test it here in a minute. We're going to see. This is a lot more slapdash than I expected, but good to see everybody. A lot happened today, though. We'll try to squeeze some of that in too. You all will also be, I'm going to need your help because, so I'm going to get my roommate. He's going to jump on Discord, and basically, I'm going to try to kill my camera here, pull up the Discord call, and see if I can share the video and audio of the Discord call through Restream so I can still have my chat, see you guys, talk to you guys. You all can see and hear me. You'd be able to see and hear Rob. Hopefully, it'll work. Well, SCOTUS grant Trump immunity. This is terrifying. Yeah, seriously, it is terrifying. I'll be honest with you. I still think that they'll rule against it, but to be quite candid with you, I didn't think they'd take the goddamn case in the first place because they didn't with his election challenges, and I thought they wouldn't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole, but apparently I was wrong. Crazy stuff, guys. Crazy stuff. Actual substance says, I don't think they will. They're taking the case to sit on it. It's a pocket veto. Also, the case, right? So it's entirely possible. Well, the fact that they've agreed to take the case is a setback anyway. But the short term advantage, no matter what the outcome is it will cause yet another delay for the DC case, which goes back to this is just going to make it this is going to make my inevitable conversation with Pisco even more heated. As much as I love Pisco because he is a stalwart defender of Merrick Garland, to me, this is yet another example of why Merrick Garland was just not the right guy at the right time because there was ample predicate to investigate Donald Trump in 2021. Right? I can't remember when Merrick Garland was named acting, or I can't remember the attorney general timeline, but Merrick Garland could have initiated a full bore investigation of Donald Trump in 2021. He didn't need to wait as long as he did. That just kicked the can down the road, and now we're under a serious time crunch. It's embarrassing. Heard Jack Smith may trim down the case. God, I hope not. Here, let me take actual off. Doesn't this seem like optic suicide for SCOTUS? I would assume they would just want to stay away from this. That way they maintain the above party politics image. They haven't. That's the problem. So, like right now, the Supreme Court's approval rating is lower than President Biden's. It's lower than Congress's. It's lower than MAGA Republicans. It's like in the mid teens in aggregate because most Americans do believe that they're out of touch and politicized. That being SCOTUS, they're not even bothering to hide it. But I'm shocked. I am surprised. Bear with me, folks. Hunter multitasking. I thought I'd have this stuff done, but ran into technical issues. It's just a pain in the butt. And again, the conversation, the debate with Rob will happen at 8 o'clock, assuming we don't run into any snafus. Hunter Biden testimony. I already did that. Please don't let Rob pivot to Clinton. Yeah, so I don't know how much overlap there is. Obviously, there are those of you in my audience who know all of like Destiny and DGG and Rob Noerr and Pisco and stuff like that. And I imagine there's a lot of you who don't. So, like right out the gate, I like Rob. I would go grab a beer with Rob. But Rob is challenging to debate for a variety of reasons. And one of them is that conversations just tend to spider web, they tend to fractal out into the ether. Pisco is the only one I know who has the tenacity to chase Rob down every point, but by then the entire conversation becomes meandering, so it just comes out in the wash anyway. And with much love to Destiny I think is too permissive with Rob too. I know I am. I know I've been in the past. So this time, now that we have established parameters over what we're going to talk about, it's going to be Devon Archer specifically. That's the topic, which is part of the Biden impeachment. And then if he wants to talk about some other stuff afterwards, if we have time, so be it. I'm happy to do that. But for the main topic, we're going to stick to Devon Archer, Devon Archer, Devon Archer. What up, Adam? Thanks for the super chat, buddy. You got that dog in you, as the kids say. The kids say it. Let's see. From this last video. 39 minutes. It was about 8 o'clock. Hope he doesn't bring up Biden being responsible for sonic inflation. You could Google sonic inflation. Sonic inflation sounds like something that the cartoon character does against Dr. Robotnik. I have no idea what that is. But no, this is not going to be about economics or anything like that. Again, if Rob wants to talk about stuff afterwards that is not the Devon Archer testimony, um, then we're fine. That I mean, potentially to do that, but I only plan on streaming until 9:30 approximately. Okay, so this is finally. Man, this took forever. Sorry about that. I like to think I'm good at multitasking, but it's a challenge. Let's see. Let's do 8 o'clock. Okay. Okay, folks. I think we're good. So now I'm going to call my buddy Jordan as a okay, here's what we're gonna do. You all are gonna be part of my test. How old is Josiah? Josiah is 32, but he feels like he's 95 at the moment. Mock, you've got Adam Mockler, you got some friends here, some pals here. Yo, A Mock, when's the next video dropping? Let's see. Okay. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna call Jordan and I'm gonna see. Let's see here. All right, Jordan. Can you all still hear me? Tell me if you all can still hear me. And Jordan, can you hear me? Can you all still hear me? Perfect. Jordan, say something and we'll see if they can hear you. Can you all hear Jordan just say testing, testing? Keep going, Jordan. Keep talking. I'll tell you when to stop. Okay, stop talking. You all can hear Jordan. Are you messing with me? Okay, no, they can't hear you. Okay, so that's fine. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to try to share the screen here real quick. Jordan, can you hear me? Can you all hear me now? Okay. Let's see. All right. Oh my God. This is, I'm telling you, dude, this is like, no, I had myself muted the whole time. Can you all hear me now? Classic. Yeah, I know I've turned purple. Just lovely. This is so good. I love it. What am I doing? Oh man, I hate everything. Can you see me, Jordan? What about? Oh, wait a minute. I don't understand why it's not connecting to. You know what? I don't care. You don't need to see me. It's irrelevant. That's fine. We can have an audio. That's fine. They just need to be able to hear you. I need to. I need to remember what my purpose is here. So let's do this. Okay, folks. I'm back. This is your brain on drugs. Okay, you listen here. I'm trying. Okay. All right. Now, Jordan, I want you to say something.
Saying something.
Okay, folks, I need to know a couple of things. Do you hear me? Do you hear Jordan? And is there an echo of any kind? This is too funny. Keep talking, Jordan.
Keeping talking. Keeping talking. Can people hear me? Testing, testing.
Basically. Hear you both, no echo. Ha ha! We got it, buddy. It's perfect.
Alrighty. Do you need me to stay on for a little bit more? Or
No, I no longer need you. You've served your sinister purpose.
okay, time to go back to Final Fantasy VII. So
All right. See you, buddy.
talk to
Thank
you later.
you. Oh, folks, this is good. All right. So, images are whack. Okay. All right. So that's what we're going to do. So at 8, so in about 16 minutes, and I'm going to let Rob know, got it figured out. And then you all can let me know um, if anything goes wrong. Actually, let me send him a text right now. And then we'll ponder some politics while we wait for Roberto Noerr. Okay, Rob's going to be here in about 5 minutes, he says, so we're good. Oh, yeah. What, buddy? No, you're fine. I'll let you know. So, um, yeah. So Mitch McConnell retiring, right? That's huge. You also have the fact that SCOTUS has taken up this case. I dropped the Mitch McConnell video. To be honest with you, I thought it would do better than what it did. But apparently nobody cares about Mitch McConnell these days. Yeah, it's huge, man. It's huge. Lauren Boebert's kid is in trouble. When does her impeachment start? Yeah, there should probably be a full bore investigation into Lauren Boebert, right? Did you all hear about the Supreme Court, the stupid Supreme Court? No, 100%. So McConnell finally stepping down. Yeah, again, that's the end of an era. That really is. I don't like Mitch McConnell. I think he's awful, but I think he's a different kind of awful than the awful that is now going to take over the Senate, right? But I also think that his political legacy will be one of irony. I think historians and political scientists will look back on Mitch McConnell and say that he played an active role in killing the very party that he dedicated his life to because, primarily through two things: the erosion of norms, particularly during the Obama administration, 2 terms, but also, trying to ride the bull that is Trump. You can't do that. So we no longer need turtle food for Mitch. Well, I'll say my Democratic colleague. Yeah, it's my Mitch McConnell. Hate that guy. What about the 100,000 uncommitted votes in Michigan? Yeah, so listen, President Biden won the 2020 election by a margin of like 45,000 votes. This is 100,000 a single state. It is a big deal. The Biden campaign should be picking up the call or the phone to call various activist groups like Listen to Michigan and things like that. It's something to take seriously. But then the question becomes, okay, what do you want? Because obviously they want a ceasefire. And actually, many of them have said it doesn't matter what Biden does. He's already lost them. I don't know if that's true or if that's, again, just to scare him or to try to scare him. But we just found out that Hamas just rejected a ceasefire. Now, granted, it was a conditional ceasefire, right? But I imagine any ceasefire will be. It's challenging. It's really challenging. I don't know. I really don't know what to make about that. But listen, I've said it before, as somebody who um, I typically don't get into international politics, which is why you haven't seen me since this channel's been up do really any video about Ukraine and Russia. It's just not my wheelhouse. It's like an entirely different discipline. I had to take a couple of foreign affairs classes and foreign politics classes um, when when I was in college, right? But it's just never interested me as, as much. And I try not to speak about things of which I'm not an expert. I shouldn't even say it because that implies I'm a political expert now. That's not what I meant. But I'm pretty well informed about domestic politics. I'm less informed about international politics. But Biden has to thread some needles, right? Biden has to thread some needles because he can't and shouldn't ignore the outcries from Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, and the Democratic base. And poll after poll shows that ceasefires are popular, or the call for ceasefire is popular. Um, but he's also, I don't know. It just you have to get both sides to agree to the ceasefire. And sure, there's leverage, right? And it's annoying the idea that we offer any ally, including Israel, unconditional aid. I think that's irresponsible. I think that um, any sorry, hang on. Any no, what happened? No, did I lose you guys? Say something. Oh no. Are you all still here? We're at just like, okay, good. So I don't know. So this is a new computer, right? So one of the things that I did was when I said I was going to stream full time, I was going to separate my personal computer, which I occasionally use for gaming, from like a computer that's optimized, built for editing. And so this computer that I'm currently on is for like my videos, and it's supposedly built for like optimal video content, right? So like making videos and editing videos and stuff like that. But the damn thing, like, it will intermittently throughout the day glitch out. It will make one of my screens because I have an Elgato prompter, right? I don't write content. I need to start scripting content like Luke Beasley does because his stuff sounds so professional. But the Elgato prompter lets me use the monitor or the prompter as a second monitor, right? So I'm able to look at the camera, look at you all while I'm talking or looking at clips. It's better than having to go back and forth, right? Um, but like the screen will go black and then my main monitor will like glitch out and I don't know. I don't know if it's a driver issue or what. I digress. The YouTube link in my profile is broken. Can you all hear me? Is my audio bad? Oh, what type of games? So the last last type of game or the last game I played was Jedi Survivor because I love Star Wars. And I just don't game that often anymore. I don't have the time. But I love Witcher 3, so I love single player RPGs. I love exploration games, right? So Witcher 3 was like the perfect intersection of those things, like game. Roberto, can you hear me, sir?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can, but why can't I pull you? Okay, there you are. So just so you know, I've got a way figured out where you and I can do the Discord call if you'd prefer that, because I don't know if you can see your chat, and I don't want to deprive you of that,
Oh,
like odds and
what?
stuff.
two things. One, I can see I go through OBS, so it doesn't.
Oh shit!
I go
Wait,
through
sorry.
OBS, so it's all right. I can do whatever. If you want to do it through Discord, the only
No,
problem
this is fine. This is
Okay.
fine. If it's not screwing you over at all.
The only thing is, on my screen, it will now show your chat and my chat, which I guess isn't a big deal. I guess I don't care.
There's
You know what I
I
mean?
mean,
I'll literally be
talking, Rob.
I'll literally be screen sharing what you see here. That's what will show up on my channel.
Okay, well, listen, it's up to you. If you would prefer it to be yours, I totally get it, which is why I was looking for a solution. So I tested it before you got here with a buddy where you and I can do a Discord call and they'll be able to hear you. They won't be able to see you. They'll be able to see and hear me and hear you, and your chat will be able to see and hear you your way.
This is fine. I don't mind it at all. This is no problem.
Okay, hang on 1 second. I'm going to grab a water. I'm still struggling with a cough here, so you're going to hear me like hack up a lung with the bubonic plague, and then we'll jump into it. So I'll be right back, and you all can have the pleasure of Rob Noerr, the ultimate conservative Joe Biden crusader, right? So the guy who is waging war against Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. He is the final boss of conservative debate bros in the Twitch poll space. You know you are. About that.
See that already I can see my opponent's in trouble here, you pondering fans. And here's why, because that's not who I am. I actually don't give two shits about Joe Biden or Hunter Biden, nor do I really care about Donald Trump. I know everyone in the left-wing sphere thinks that's the case, but it's not true. I care about the institutions that I view as corrupt. So I care more about institutions like the FBI, the CIA, institutions like our mainstream media, engaging what I consider a two-tiered system. I think that they will exist long after individual politicians or individual members of those institutions. And we need to fix those before we can have debates on sort of substantive issues such as the border, such as foreign policy, etc. Because right now, I feel because of that corruption, our voice doesn't matter. They put their thumbs on the scale of elections and scale sort of our political narrative. And for me, it's a precursor solving that to make sure that we have a voice. I don't even consider myself the most conservative. It's unfortunate that I'm one of the best conservative debaters for conservatives because I'm not all that conservative. I'm probably closer to a libertarian than most conservatives would like. For example, I have no problem with things like gay marriage. Basically, I want the government to leave me alone most of the time. And I think a lot of traditional conservatives, I'm not saying it makes them bad people, but they want government involved more in our social life more than I would be comfortable with most times. Though I will admit, I'm less libertarian than I used to be. But yeah, I think a slight misnomer to say that I'm just a Biden hater or something like that. I'm trying to set it up so my chat and your chats are, so my channel can see sort of both of them. And then we can compare. I bet mine has more curse words, is my guess.
Man, I don't know. We'll see. I feel like if anybody is going to bring out curse words in my chat, it will be you, my man, which is a compliment, right?
Yeah.
Welcome.
Where's your boy at? Is he going to help you tonight?
Who's my boy? Destiny or Pisco?
No. Pisco. You're his little. Have you ever seen the movie Christmas Story? It's one of my favorite Christmas movies. Yeah. You know the bully character?
Where do you shoot your eye out, kid?
Yeah. You got the bully character, and then he's got his little toady friend. That's you.
You're the toady friend?
guy. You're the toady guy.
That's fair.
Which is funny because you're far outpacing Pisco as far as viewership now. You're crushing me. Which I will have to say before we get started, from honest to goodness, I do mean this. I think your politics are dog shit, but I think you've been working very hard and you deserve to get a bigger reach. And I'm very happy for you. And I hope it works out for you. And I hope it's something, I don't know if it's your career or if it's a hobby, but whatever you want out of it, I hope you're getting out.
So I just went full time 2 weeks ago, or not this past Friday, but a week ago on Friday. So it's been good, man, but it's been the grind. Now, obviously you're married with kids, so our situations are different. I've got a girlfriend, but no kids. I work remotely or used to work remotely. So I had more time to kind of grind at this, but it really is a grind. I heard that you're going to be going on Tim Pool.
That's the plan. So it was supposed to be March 1st. It's going to be on his daytime show. And so it's more of, he likes to have multiple guests. So I think they want me to debate someone, and they were hoping for some bigger name people. for me to debate. And unfortunately, there's been scheduling conflicts. So it looks like that's going to be put off. It was supposed to be March 1st. Now it's going to be March 15th. But it might get pushed off until early April if they can't find the appropriate people. So I know they didn't. I don't know. I probably shouldn't say anything. They wanted to get new blood on, but like bigger people. So they were trying to get like the Krasensteins or Cenk or someone like that. But
why not like Steven or Vosh?
I wouldn't want to debate Vosh. I really want to debate Vosh, but I'd like for him to stew in his little scandal here. And so I feel like if he was on there, we wouldn't be talking. I don't really have anything to say about alleged interest of Vosh on that level. And I'm afraid that that's what the topic would generate to that. And I would just have to sit there and say, I have nothing to say. I don't care. Destiny, I'd love to debate. And I recommended that. But I think they're trying to get a diverse cast of left-wingers. They feel like they've had Destiny many times. But maybe it will be Destiny. I personally reached out to Destiny and asked if he would be interested. And he said to keep him posted. So I would love to debate Destiny on there. So we'll see what happens. It's not up to, and here's the other thing, and maybe you'll realize, you'll probably get invites as you grow to other shows. If you're streaming or something like this, you always have to remember this. Be humble and understand that we're up and comers. Like, am I really going to get upset if they're like, schedule me March 1st, and then they're like, oh, sorry, we can't have you on because Matt Gaetz is coming on. Or Don.
Yeah, you really have no leverage, or you're not in a position to bitch about it. Yeah,
exactly. So I'm not upset at all. I understand how it works. And if you've ever set up debates or something, scheduling people is a nightmare. So I totally get it. For me, I hope I have a little time in advance because I do home health care. And like this week, I was supposed to be at my home office. I'm not. I just clocked out right before we came on because when you do home health care, if someone calls off, it's not like the factory where you could not show up. I have to be here until someone shows up. So it doesn't matter how much I protest. It is what it is. So I can't just, Tim Pool's the type of show you have to be there in person. So it'll be about a 4.5 hour drive for me. I can't just pick up and leave and tell my work, like, sorry, I'm not coming in today. So hopefully they schedule me a little in advance.
Yeah. So, well, good luck with that. So again, I'm struggling with basically, I feel like tuberculosis. I've had a persistent cough for a couple of weeks. Maybe as a home healthcare worker, you can diagnose me.
I don't do that. Trust me. My job requires not even a GED. So I have a master's degree, but I don't do healthcare in the sense that like I'm diagnosing stuff. I'm basically a live-in aid for people with developmental disabilities like autism. So I'm not making any medical decisions, I assure you.
Gotcha. Well, it's definitely, it's fascinating then, because obviously I imagine that would require quite a bit of empathy and compassion. And yet the debate bro aspect of me, you can be pretty ruthless. And so I want to prepare the chat here. So
I find I reciprocate energy.
Right. No, and listen, there's nothing wrong with that because I love the banter. So for those of you who are watching from my audience, again, some of you know Rob because you're from DGG. There's an overlap there. But for those of you who don't, Rob, would you introduce yourself in terms of what your politics are? And I'm going to do the same with your chat for those who don't know me.
Yeah, so I'm Rob Noerr. I've lived in rural Pennsylvania my whole life. Everyone I know is a blue-collar worker, probably Red Wing, but 90% of the people I know aren't political, or weren't at least. I went off to university and did policy debate in college, which is the left of the left. And so that's where I got an interest in debate. I started streaming. I started like posting on blogs and stuff, but started streaming really, I think, around 2017. And my reasoning was I didn't feel anyone spoke up for people in rural America. So I do consider myself a libertarian leaning conservative, but more than anything, I'm a populist whose primary focus is on corruption in the institutions that I think are a two-tiered system that are entrenching an establishment that means that voices like all of ours aren't heard.
Okay, fair enough. So you would say that your primary like political mission, even more so than policy, is just the general mission towards anti-corruption. Okay.
Yes.
And I assume that as far as you're concerned, that knows no parties, right? That's corruption for the Democrats, corruption for the Republicans, even if you think corruption is more prevalent on one side.
Yes.
Fair enough. So for me, for Rob's audience, my name is Josiah, aka Pondering Politics. I'm an unapologetically partisan progressive Democrat. I think that the Republican Party is collectively an authoritarian cult of personality with no limiting principle. I think the Democrats, for all their faults, I think that they're by far the better option with respect to policy and record and position and things like that. So I want to see them succeed. I also believe in matching energy, or at least reserving the right to. And kind of to that end, in terms of electoral politics, I'd like to see Democrats take more of a page out of the Republican playbook and be more ruthless electorally. And I'm hoping that for a blue wave in 2024. But that's me. You can find me at youtube.com/@ponderingpolitics. So in terms of what we wanted to talk about, I know that we said on Twitter that it was specifically going to be about Devon Archer. Okay. Now, can you, for the audience, say who Devon Archer is and what your position is on his testimony? Kind of like give your perspective on it. And if I have any disagreement on it, obviously I'll challenge you there. But
so Devon Archer is this businessman who is friends with Hunter Biden. And basically Devon Archer starts this business where he brings Hunter Biden on board, where they're sort of trying to get investments for like venture capitalists. So they're going around the world. The way he runs into Burisma, if you don't know anything about this story, Burisma is this gas company in Ukraine that's ran by, this isn't my words, this is the Obama-Biden administration, a corrupt pro-Russian oligarch named Zlochevsky. This dude's been in trouble with the law and accused of things by Western nations for quite some time. So basically, Devon Archer goes over to meet Zlochevsky for one of these business ventures, and Zlochevsky's like, forget about all that. How would you like to be a member of Burisma? How would you like to be on the board? Would you like to talk to the former president of Poland? He's on the board. Devon Archer goes, talks to him, agrees to come on the board. They originally hire Hunter Biden on his council, but then in, I believe, April of 2014, they actually hired Hunter Biden to the board, in which seems pretty evident from almost everyone's testimony. That was their ultimate goal. They went through Archer to get to Hunter Biden because they wanted a Biden because they thought it would help them.
Okay. And in terms of the testimony that he provided, so to put this in context, and again, you tell me before you, because I want to set it up as far as like the connection to the Biden impeachment inquiry. And again, let me know if you quibble with this. So obviously, since January 2023, when Republicans took the majority in the House of Representatives, one of their foremost political missions has been to try to impeach President Biden. And Devon Archer, in his capacity as a business acquaintance, or excuse me, a business associate and a longtime acquaintance of Hunter Biden, was pitched in the media as going to provide the smoking gun. He was going to be a decisive witness against Hunter Biden and ultimately, by connection, Joe Biden. Would you agree with that that was how it was hyped up?
Well, I don't disagree with the section you're talking about. I think it starts before this, though, because I think that the reason this became a story in the first place was because of the first impeachment of Donald Trump. So that's when all of this story started to become in the public eye, which was that they
sure, to be sure, but I mean in terms of because we're going to be talking about the testimony itself, but I just wanted to establish, like, you laid a pretty good like setup of who Devon Archer is relative to Hunter Biden, but his significance to the Joe Biden impeachment inquiry, which is the context for the testimony. I was just trying to bridge.
He was testifying in front of the impeachment committee, but I just want to stress, when I talked about this, it was well before any impeachment inquiry, and the reason was, to me, it was a legitimate defense in the impeachment of Donald Trump to say, when he's talking to Zelensky and he's asking about this prosecutor that got fired by the name of Victor Shokin, if there was potential malfeasance there, there's no reason to impeach Trump. Trump as president, as the executive, is allowed to look into potential crimes that involved billions of U.S. tax dollars. And so that's where this story begins. It's not that the Republicans were trying to weaponize this story to go after Biden. It's that the Democrats weaponized this to go after Trump and impeach him over nothing. That's where this story started. And then once the facts started to come out, that was like, wait a minute, actually, there's a lot here that should have been investigated. Then they cried foul and said, this is just them trying to do what we did to them. As always, what you'll see is Democrats will be upset that Republicans might potentially do to them what they've been doing to Republicans. So I disagree with your framing of it. I don't think this was initially a get Joe Biden thing. It was a response to
No. I'm talking about
Trump.
the impeachment inquiry itself began in 2023.
Yes, that's true.
Okay. So anyway, so that's the bridge to it. I don't want to relitigate the impeachments of Donald Trump. Otherwise, we're going to be here well past 90 minutes. So then the impeachment, the testimony of Devon Archer occurs. It's done behind closed doors. The transcript is eventually released. With respect to the impeachment effort against President Biden, what is your take of the Devon Archer testimony? Do you think it's damning? Do you think it's a nothing burger? Do you think it's somewhere in between? Do you think Republicans overhyped it? What's your assessment of it? And I'll give you mine.
Okay. So first off, looking at it through the lens of purely impeachment isn't the right way to look at it. When when you're looking at, I don't really care about Joe Biden. I care about a double standard in our institutions, such as the FBI. And so we could look and say, is it impeachable? That's a difficult question because impeachment's political. You don't even have to prove a crime. So you could say the mere fact that we know definitively that Joe Biden lied about having contacts with his business people, theoretically, people could say, well, that's impeachable. We should impeach him. So I don't know the utility of talking about that. If you like, I could give you the 4 major things that I saw.
Yeah.
That this
I will
testimony.
say before you give your 4 major things, I agree with you that that impeachment is it's not criminal prosecution, right? So the standard of evidence is considerably lower. Now the standard is supposed to be treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors. But what's a high crime and misdemeanor, right? So to your point, you can get flexible. Whoever the impeaching party is can get a bit creative. So go ahead.
And
give your 4
it's
things.
even, and I know, like, we're now going to see the Supreme Court just granted cert. Can the president, even after he's president, be charged with a crime? So that. Right. If it had to be a crime, you would have this absurd sort of paradoxical argument, but the president can't commit a crime while he's president. So therefore, how could you ever impeach? So clearly when they say high crimes and misdemeanors, it's in the judgment of political people. So even if me and you could argue, technically that's not a crime, it could still be impeachable if that's
agreed. Yeah, it's not. It's just simply not a criminal. It's not a criminal standard. I completely agree. Be it Biden, Trump, or whoever else, completely agree. So yeah, go ahead and give your 4 things.
Okay, so what Devon Archer's testimony showed us was, I'll be brief about all of them. 1, that Biden was the brand, that's how they were making money by Joe Biden being there. 2nd, that Biden met with Vadim and other people. Vadim was like sort of the second in command,
corporate secretary.
Right. Yeah. So he met with him and met with many other business leaders involved in Rosemont Seneca and with Archer and Biden's business, and was on phone calls with him all the time in front of these business leaders. 3rd, that Hunter Zolchevsky told Hunter Biden one evening that they were at the Four Seasons, I'm under pressure from Ukrainian government investigations. Call your dad. Or he didn't say, I'm sorry, call. I want you to make a call. Then Devon Archer left, and he said that a call was made, and his assumption is that that call was to his father, to Joe Biden. Then a few short days after that, we know that's when Joe Biden came up with the quid pro quo to force the firing of Viktor Shokin, the Ukrainian prosecutor who was investigating Hunter Biden's company. And the 4th is that this testimony, and this is the most damning thing, I went from least to most damning, and I'll be interested to get your take on this. The defense of Joe Biden's quid pro quo, you tell me if I'm wrong. This is the primary defense. That firing Viktor Shokin, forcing the firing with $1 billion of your tax dollars of the prosecutor looking into his son's company wasn't a big deal because that prosecutor wasn't really investigating. Correct? That's the argument.
That is part of the argument.
Well, that's the major part of the argument. Because you would agree a president or a vice president or someone in an executive branch using your tax dollars to force the firing of a prosecutor looking into their family member is really bad.
So I would agree with you that simply that that trying to influence foreign policy simply to benefit a member of your family, yes, that is corrupt no matter who does it. But I'll give you my take on the situation when you're done with yours.
Okay, so this is the last thing. Despite the fact for years we were told that there was no Ukrainian government investigations, Devon Archer testified that the reason Zolchevsky asked Hunter to make this call was because he was under pressure from, quote, Ukrainian government investigations. And so that was the biggest bombshell in this testimony, that the defense that the Biden administration and Biden defenders had given all along, that actually there was no investigations from the prosecutor general or from the Ukrainian government into Zolchevsky, was a lie. And then, of course, we know the end result, which you can't dispute. The firing of Viktor Shokin ended up being an incredible benefit to Burisma and to Zolchevsky and to Hunter Biden's company, because the new guy came in and within 8 months dropped the investigation completely, which Zolchevsky was allowed to come back to Ukraine because he was basically exiled, or by choice, he self-exiled. He came back, celebrated, and started to make a bunch of money again. Those are the 4 things.
Gotcha. So my take of the situation is this. So I think that the Devon Archer testimony is a nothing burger, certainly with respect to impeachment. And maybe that's something, I know you said that you don't look at it quite through the lens of impeachment, that it's a broader issue for you with respect to your perception of double standards. And that's fine. And maybe we can agree on the impeachment thing, or maybe not. Well, let me ask you this. Do you think Devon Archer's testimony is damning with respect to impeaching Biden?
Yes, because
fair
I
enough.
would impeach. I'll just say real quick,
Sure.
I would impeach because Biden lied about his contacts and because he did this quid pro quo. And now we have evidence that Zlochevsky wanted this guy gone, or he knew that there was Ukrainian government investigation. So I would say that I wouldn't say that this alone makes it impeachable, but I think it far moves the bar there. There's other things that I would
Sure.
impeach him for as well.
Sure. Okay. So here's my take on it. So to me, the Devon Archer testimony is truly a nothing burger for a couple of reasons. Number one, so again, Devon Archer, a longtime acquaintance and business associate of Hunter Biden. He's familiar with Vadim and Mykola Zlochevsky. He's a guy who's in the know. He says, number one, that Hunter Biden, as far as he's concerned, that the interest that Burisma had in him was justified because he was an attorney, he was a lobbyist, he was somebody with relevant expertise. He worked for major law firms who also were able to lend their clout to Burisma and to PR and things of that nature. Number one. Number two, the times that he witnessed Joe Biden and Hunter Biden interact with one another, he said that there was never any damning exchanges, that there was never discussion of business, there was never any sort of attempt at leveraging influence. He has no evidence that Joe Biden was working with Hunter Biden to exploit the Biden family name. He actually said that it was important for Hunter, in his estimation, to be very fastidious about the law and not breaking the law. The situation with the firing Victor Shokin, to me, the timeline doesn't work right for a few reasons. Number one, even if we grant all the premises that phone call actually happened, it happened as described by Devon Archer, and he's under the pains and penalties of perjury, right? So if he lies during those congressional questions, he'll suffer consequences. So it's fair to take him at face value. But the timeline doesn't work because that trip that then Vice President Biden was supposed to take to Ukraine to pressure the Ukrainian government to make major reforms and to oust Shokin, that was planned weeks in advance before the phone call in early December. So to me, the timeline doesn't work. To say nothing of the fact that the de jure, the official on paper investigation of Burisma concerned a timeline that predated Hunter Biden in the first place, right? So it's not like Hunter Biden was in any way implicated by Shokin's on paper investigations. And there's also at least some evidence to indicate that Shokin wasn't investigating. The fact that I think there were, I can't remember how many millions, 23 million pounds or something like that were unfrozen in 2016 by the British because Shokin wasn't providing evidence against Burisma, so the British could no longer keep those assets frozen. So from Archer's testimony, I would agree that there's some evidence that Vadim and Mykola at least felt or said that they were under pressure from the Ukrainian government, and perhaps you could say that that's Shokin himself. But Archer also testifies that he was told by affiliates of Burisma that Shokin remaining in power would be good for them. So again, there's mixed testimony, but at the end of the day, Archer says that he never heard anything damning from Joe Biden. When, as a matter of fact, at the very end, Dan Goldman asks him, do you agree with this assessment of Joe Biden that he never influenced foreign policy corruptly and that he had no connection to Hunter Biden's business ventures? And Archer says, yeah, I would not dispute that at all. Plus the brand thing, he says Joe Biden's the brand, but then later on he says, well, Joe Biden is part of the brand, not the brand itself. So that's my take on it. To me, it's a nothing burger.
So first off, most of what you said, even if I was to concede, it doesn't dispute any of the things that I said. Let's use what I would consider possibly the two best defenses that you have here, and then we'll roll back. So the idea that Devon Archer said, well, I never heard Joe Biden change his policy because of this. Correct? That's what you're saying. And he said that under penalty.
That is one of the things he said.
Right.
But he has no evidence that Joe Biden changed policy or changed behavior or conduct to benefit Hunter.
Him having no evidence of that doesn't mean that it didn't occur. So it's not like that this is dispositive that sort of thing could happen. And it makes sense because when you listen to Devon Archer, both in this and then in interviews he's given afterwards, explain what his situation was. He was brought on to be someone who was geared towards more financial type stuff, as you admitted, right? That's why he claims that he was brought on, right? Why would you intentionally tell everyone in your organization if you're like offering corrupt bribes to officials in powerful countries across the world? You wouldn't. They're going to
Sure.
keep as few people as possible in this loop. And Devon Archer admits, he even admits, you can tell not just by what he's saying in this testimony, but also in interviews he's given afterwards, he left the room when they were like, okay, it's time to make that call. That's not the sort of thing he was involved with. He wasn't there.
But Rob, surely you would agree. I mean, I agree that it's not necessarily dispositive. I don't dispute that. I'm not saying that this exonerates Biden, but at the end of the day, you and Republicans are making a claim for which you need to provide evidence, and Devon Archer does not provide evidence of Joe Biden's corruption.
Sure he does. But I outlined the four. He showed that it was Biden's brand, or that it was the Biden brand.
That's not what he said, though. He said it at one point, Rob, but with all due respect, you've seen the transcripts where he goes back and says DC is the brand. And Joe Biden was a major component of it, to be sure. But Archer was very quick, and I suppose he repeated himself multiple times to emphasize that Joe Biden himself was not the brand. And even if Joe Biden was the brand, as we saw later on in the testimony, Hunter Biden wanting to convince Burisma officials and whoever was interacting with him that he may have some influence over his father is not proof that he had influence over his father, especially when he told Archer and otherwise, hey, listen, I have no control over my dad's conduct or activity. So how do you square these things?
Well, because this part of it, saying that Biden was the brand, isn't necessarily saying that this is proof that Joe Biden was involved with it. But why Hunter? Are you disputing this, that the testimony of Devon Archer and just what intuitively makes sense and testimony of people we've seen name starts with a G that just testified here recently. The reason that Hunter Biden got hired wasn't his expertise in Ukrainian oil acquisition or gas acquisition. It's because he was the vice president's son. And that Hunter and James Biden were going around selling the brand. Now, that doesn't mean on its own that Joe Biden had access. For example, let's say that I become president. I have two brothers and a sister. They could be going out there against my knowledge and saying, hey, the president's my brother. Maybe you should hire me. The brand is the name. Biden is the brand. That doesn't mean that Joe was directly involved.
But again, I dispute that. With respect, I dispute that. And if you want me to wait, that's fine. But I dispute that characterization, because Biden, he says, was part of the brand. If you cap basically the transcript at page 30, then yeah, I would agree with you. But as he goes on, he clarifies, okay, listen, Joe Biden was not the brand. Joe Biden was the biggest part of the Biden component of the brand. It's a subset of a subset. I'm not saying that it's not relevant, but I think you're being very reductive when you say Joe Biden was the brand, because that's not what Devon Archer said.
I completely disagree. For example, they had former, I forget what his title was, but he was former Beretta was one of those guys. He was on the Atlantic Council, and then he was formerly an attorney general, I think. They had certainly many people just from D.C. The reason they wanted specifically Hunter Biden was because he was a Biden, and they were able to leverage that. We could disagree. I think it's self-evident, and it's also evident from the testimony of Hunter Biden where he talks.
Can I ask you this? Because again, I'm not. Certainly, the last name was a major component. Archer testifies to that himself. I will never dispute that. You would agree that it's not the only component, right? And you would agree that Archer says specifically that in his testimony, that it was also corporate governance, that it was his legal background, that it was also his affiliation with Boies Scheller and Blue Star Strategies and various DC lobbying firms. And it was his work in the past on such things. Devon Archer himself is not exactly an expert in Ukrainian energy from what I recall. So you would agree that it's not just the Biden last name, right?
What you're suggesting could be said of any sort of nepotism ever, right? You could say,
understand.
Well, he speaks English, so that's an asset. So it's not in totality. Let me just finish this. It is. I will just ask you as blatantly as possible. Do you think Hunter Biden would have been sought out by them if his father wasn't a prominent politician?
I don't think he was sought out by him. My understanding was it was Archer who brought Hunter Biden in as counsel for 2 months. Then during those 2 months, he established a relationship with Vadim and Mykola Zlochevsky, and then they brought him on board literally as a member of the board. It wasn't like they went hunting for Hunter Biden.
No, that's
the contrary.
I mean, I'm not going to belabor the point anymore, but it's clear, again, in interviews you see, I'm not so sure if he says it specifically in the transcript, but in interviews, that's when Devon Archer realized, oh shit, we're in too deep. Now they've just put the vice president's son as board of directors. It's clear that Devon Archer thinks they got this dude. They sought him out because he's the vice president's son. Nonetheless, the brand portion of it's just one part. I think that's the least important part that this showed.
Okay.
It also shows that Biden lied about meeting. He said he never met any of the business associates. That's a lie. Devon Archer shows that. Shows that he was on phone calls with them. Shows we know from this testimony and elsewhere that he personally met with people like Vadim and other people.
Can you remind me just real quick? Can you send me a link if possible? I know famously that Joe Biden said that he had nothing to do. I think he even said it to Peter Doocy. He's like, I had nothing to do with my son's business dealings. He got pretty testy about that.
Mm-hmm.
Did he ever say that he never encountered elements or business associates of Hunter Biden?
I'll try to find it, and I'll try to say
that's fine. That's fine, and you don't have to do it now in real time. You can come back and send that shit to me.
So that's the second point. The third point is that Hunter was told to call back home, which Devon Archer assumes that was his father, and then he called. You say that the timeline doesn't make sense. So let's talk about that for a second. Just because this meeting was pre-planned, it doesn't mean that this wouldn't be important. I don't understand this timeline argument whatsoever. So let's do a little hypothetical. Let's say you're a corrupt oligarch and you're trying to bribe an official, right? And let's say that you know that official is coming to your country and he's going to talk to leaders in your country, right? Do you think that you would have an incentive like a mere 5 days before that travel arrangement began to actually say, I want you to call back home and make sure this is all going good?
If I were brazen enough, sure. But again, you need to provide evidence of that. This is the problem. This is my argument as to why the timeline doesn't work. Because my understanding of your argument, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is the phone call was made in early December from Hunter Biden to DC. It is inferred that is to Joe Biden. Then 5 days later, Joe Biden travels to Ukraine and issues strong demands for reform in the Ukrainian Attorney General's office or Prosecutor General's office. Ergo, one can assume or one should infer that the phone call influenced Joe Biden's actions. The reason that doesn't work for me is that we have evidence that the actions that Joe Biden took in mid or early December, I think it was like 8th or 9th, were planned weeks in advance. We have the contemporary emails and the memorandum from the State Department in which, like in mid-November, they're like, Mr. Vice President, when you go to Ukraine, you're going to bitch at them for the corruption in their Prosecutor General's office. You're going to demand reform, et cetera, and so forth. So I'm asking you, since you made the claim, what evidence you have? Because I'll say this. In the absence of contemporaneous emails and whatever to the contrary, I would be much more amenable. I don't think it'd still be proof, but I would be much more amenable to the idea that Hunter Biden calls DC, assume it's his father. 5 days later, his father does something which you could argue benefits Hunter Biden's company. I think that's a more persuasive argument in the absence of proof that Biden's actions were set in stone weeks in advance.
Did you have this amount of charitability when it came to impeachments of Trump? Did you say if there is a hypothetical explanation, even if it looks like smoke, if there's any potential hypothetical explanation, well, then that proves that it doesn't make sense. And absent of 100% proof means that it's not impossible and it's a nothing burger. Did you have that amount of charitability?
So, Rob, without relitigating, and we're not going to go off on a gazillion tangents.
We don't have to. I'm asking you.
Well, wait a minute. Let's use the first impeachment of Donald Trump as an example. Let's say that there was, I don't know, contemporaneous evidence that prior to the phone call, the infamous perfect phone call that Trump made to Zelensky, that Donald Trump had a genuine anti-corruption interest in Ukraine. It wasn't about the Bidens. If there was basically some sort of exculpatory evidence in advance, then I would be much less likely to infer sinister intent. The problem why this doesn't work is not only does that evidence not exist, but number two, Trump's phone call was specifically about Joe Biden. It wasn't even just anti-corruption in general. It wasn't like, hey, listen, you got a lot of corruption there in Ukraine. You guys need to clean it up. It was specifically about the Bidens. So I think it's an apples and oranges comparison.
Okay, it's not, right? And let me explain. So first off, you say, we'll get to the overarching picture here in a second, but what you're saying is that the reason that this doesn't raise any red flags is because there was a State Department memo, I believe in November, that said, when you eventually travel, you should mention corruption.
I think you're being pretty reductive. It was like, hit it hard, demand reforms, et cetera, and so forth. Yeah.
Did that memo say, the aid that we've agreed to give, guaranteeing this IMF loan for $1 billion, we want you to offer a quid pro quo unless they fire this specific prosecutor? Did it say that?
No, the memorandum does not mention leveraging aid.
Okay, and we also have, I could send you the video afterwards if you want. We had someone that was on the plane with Biden as he's flying over that says that it was Biden himself that came up with the idea of the quid pro quo on the plane ride. That would be post the phone call. But no one else. Can you show me any record, real quick? Can you show me any record of anyone in the State Department contemporaneously before Biden issued the quid pro quo recommending that we issue this quid pro quo?
So I don't know what the date was, but don't we have evidence from, I think, George Kent, State Department official, who actually said it was somebody else who came up with the idea to leverage the congressional aid? I'm almost certain that that's the case.
What happens is this. You had a bunch of people post hoc say, yeah, we were talking about that, but no one's shown any contemporaneous proof.
Wait, what do you mean post hoc about it? No, are you talking about leveraging the aid or insisting on changes to the prosecutor general's office?
When it comes to the quid pro quo and the ousting of Victor Shokin, we have a lot of people that said afterwards, like George Kent. Yeah, in fact, when I've debated other people on this, they've said this. They started having discussions in April of 2015 about getting rid of Victor Shokin. That would be only like 2 months after he was in office. It makes no sense. So people have said this, but all of these meetings are going on. The only evidence that we find from European groups, from State Department memos, none of them ever suggest firing Victor Shokin until the November memo mentions corruption, but it doesn't mention any sort of quid pro quo. Then we have people after the quid pro quo and after it becomes a big story because you're downplaying the significance of this. The idea that we had a vice president use your tax dollars to force the firing of a prosecutor looking into his son's company is insane. And the onus should be...
Do you want this through Twitter DMs or do you want it through Discord?
Twitter DM more.
Okay, cool. I don't know if it goes straight to the page, but look at... let me see here. 1 second.
So
I'm sorry. Continue talking. Keep talking.
So anyways, so when we have that situation, it warrants an immediate investigation. The appearance of a conflict of interest is so significant on its own right. That would be impeachable. Biden should have been impeached at the time, and he should understand that he should not have been involved in this situation. If it's truly legitimate that it had nothing to do with his son, he shouldn't have been involved in any way, what shape or form. And what you're saying is we have now more specific evidence that days before he issues this quid pro quo, that it looks like Hunter called his dad at the request of Zlochevsky, who was saying, I'm under pressure from Ukrainian government investigations, right? Call your dad. So he calls his dad, and 5 days later, for the first time, all of a sudden we're talking about, well, we're leveraging this aid now. Can you name me a time in the history of the United States where we've ever leveraged aid on the condition of firing a single prosecutor?
Not to my knowledge.
It's never happened. I've asked people this over and over. I've researched extensively. Never happened. So this is unique. Can you name me a time when you've had a prominent official use tax dollars to force the firing of a prosecutor looking into their family?
Well, they're not. Well, okay. So hang on. I'm trying to find you this exact quote here in real time. So number one, we don't know that that's what happened. So Hunter Biden was not being looked into. Wait a minute. Hunter Biden was not being looked into. Hunter Biden was not being looked into.
That's irrelevant. You don't know that one.
Well, number one, you need to prove it because it's your claim, Rob.
Okay,
you're the one claiming that Hunter Biden has been.
I can prove it. You ready?
Go ahead.
Would it have hurt Hunter Biden significantly if his company was no longer able to pay him because they were found guilty of some corruption charge?
Well, no, I don't know that because he was paid a lucrative amount of money. Right?
You don't know if him getting $83,000 a month on average, that was an incentive for him to not want that company to be punished?
It's page 218, by the way, paragraph 20.
I'll send you that. Paragraph 20. Okay.
Yeah, page 218. 218 paragraph.
And this is from testimony in the impeachment career of George Kent.
Yeah, George Kent.
Who, by the way, lied under oath and should be charged, but neither here nor
there. A couple of things.
Where'd you send it? The Twitter DMs?
I thought you said Discord DMs. I'm sorry. It was Discord.
If you could, my computer's prone to overheating.
I'll send it to you. That's fine. Okay. Twitter DMs better?
Yeah. And then you'll have to give me the page number in the paragraph again.
No,
and this is going to say this is going to be before December of 2015, where he says quid pro quo fire.
No, to be very clear, he says he does not remember the timeline. He just says from his recollection, it wasn't Vice President Biden who came up with the idea. It was Ambassador Pyatt in discussion with, I'm blanking on her name, Victoria Newland. Newland is Victoria is her first name. 1 second. Can you hear me, Rob? Did I lose connection? Oh my God. Can you all hear me? Did we lose Rob? Can you all see Rob? Son of a bitch. Rob is actually, his connection's fine. Yeah, he is. He's pulling a McConnell. All right. I didn't listen to like the last 5 minutes because I was trying to do this in real time. Again, my multitasking sucks, but I hate like leaving dangling threads here. So I tried to do this in real time. Let's see.
Sorry, my computer's prone to overheating. I do want to apologize to you and your audience. I was supposed to be at my home office, but I got called in, so I got this shitty laptop. We're gonna.
No, you're good. You're good, man. And by the way, until that, everything has been like perfect connection.
And I want to ask you just real quick: is it all right if I rip your feed?
Absolutely,
because I'm not going to stream it anymore because I think it's going to overheat my computer. So
that's fine. I can. I'll send you. You can either rip it or I can send you the MP4.
Okay.
If you want.
Yeah. No, either way, we'll talk about it afterwards. No
that's
problem.
Fine. So
what page was that? You wanted me to read that, or?
It was page 218, paragraph 20, and it's George Kent under oath saying that the idea to leverage the foreign aid, from his best recollection, did not generate from then Vice President Biden, but then Ambassador Pyatt with Victoria Newland. And again, put that in your back pocket because he doesn't have a date for it. He says you'd have to look at the memorandum to like verify when that suggestion was made.
Right, now but no one's been able to release a memorandum. Again, what we see instead is, for example,
can I because I was multitasking while you were talking. I want to make sure I have an understanding of what you're talking about. So again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you interrupt me if I get things wrong. You agree that there is evidence, contemporaneous evidence, indicating that Biden, number one, planned to go to Ukraine in December, and that he planned to lean on the Ukrainian government to make reforms in the prosecutor general's office. You agree with both these things?
Yeah, that's been a long-stated mission of them, yes.
Fair enough. For you, the key part is that this phone call, which again, Devon Archer says the phone call, according to Vadim, he says that Vadim told him that the phone call was to DC. And at one point he says, I assumed that was to Joe Biden, but then he goes on to say DC. Mm-hmm. That's fine. But let's just assume the premise that the phone call was made, number one, and it was made to Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
To you, there's still something there because what could have changed was Joe Biden didn't intend to leverage foreign aid to get Shokin fired. And that was the thing that the phone call triggered. Is that right?
It doesn't necessarily have to be that, but absolutely, there is no contemporaneous claims that we've seen from anywhere that anyone suggested leveraging aid. And I could send you a video where we actually have one of the assistants that was on the plane with Biden saying it was Joe Biden himself on the plane ride that said, I'm going to offer a quid pro quo for this aid unless they fire. So the idea that it doesn't make sense to me because the defense is sort of not a defense anyways, which is saying, oh, the fact that the State Department had this memo in December, well, that memo, in November, I think that's what I said. That memo also is right after the time that we see Vadim send out an email to Hunter and Devon Archer, which it says, we want you to contact people in the United States, U.S. officials that are in Ukraine, U.S. officials publicly and privately in the United States, including to support Burisma and Zlochevsky to the highest level here in Ukraine, the president of Ukraine, the president's chief of staff, the prosecutor general. The scope should include organizations visit a number of widely recognized with the ultimate purpose of closing down any cases pursuits against Zlochevsky in Ukraine. So what we see is, as soon as this email goes out, right, all of a sudden there's now this, well, we need to get rid of Shokin's a problem. Now they start talking about Shokin specifically, which they had, but no one suggests this quid pro quo. Then it looks like what's happening is Burisma and Zlochevsky is putting pressure on Hunter Biden for this month in November, December. You have these reports coming out from the New York Times that are like, holy shit, Hunter Biden works for this corrupt oligarch. And so there's this pressure. You see that Zlochevsky's feeling the heat. And in Archer's words, he said he was feeling pressure from Ukrainian government investigations. So at this point, they've been paying Hunter handsomely. It's time to earn your money. So he says, call DC, which Hunter assumes is his father. And so then all of a sudden we get the quid pro quo. Now, there was pressure on Poroshenko to oust corruption. You'll admit this, right? Since 2014. Since Poroshenko came in.
This wasn't something that generated, in 2015.
And we had, for example, the precursor to Shokin was a man by the name of Urema. He got fired for allegedly being corrupt, right? And there was all of these reports, even when we had people like Victoria Nuland that was sending emails to Viktor Shokin saying, hey, we're happy to work with you, et cetera, et cetera. They still were constantly talking about corruption in the prosecutors of Ukraine, even if it wasn't specifically directed at Shokin. So your argument that's like, well, I think it's definitive evidence or it's very good evidence that the State Department put out this memo in November makes no sense. It doesn't speak to the end. And again, I think that you're underselling the accusation, or not even the accusation, the facts and what they illustrate. Like, I understand we have a country where you're innocent until proven guilty, and that's true on a criminal level. But on a government level, sometimes you have to see that the appearance of corruption itself is something to be avoided. Would you disagree with this statement? Anytime that we have a prominent official with access to our tax dollars that uses those tax dollars to force the firing of a prosecutor that's looking at their family's business, that there ought to be an immediate and thorough investigation.
I have no issue. I take no issue whatsoever with the investigation into this in the first place. I don't have a beef with that because I agree that you could easily look at this and see, if you glance at it, you see impropriety. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that during I don't know if it was the Trump impeachment. I think it was. There was sworn deposition from bipartisan career officials in the State Department who also thought it was kind of sketch that Hunter Biden was working for Burisma. 100%. I think that you could easily see in good faith potential impropriety here. But again, for me, it comes down to the claims and what you can prove. So
here's what I can prove. Can you explain to me what the FBI investigation was into Joe Biden after that quid pro quo?
I don't know if there was one.
Right, but you just said that you think there should have been.
Yeah, but I don't. That's not a contradiction.
Okay, so if there wasn't, which there wasn't, does that mean that you would think that something went horribly awry?
There should have been some form of inquiry. I don't know if it needed to be an FBI investigation, but there should.
Who should have?
I don't know what. There should have been some form of investigation, either from the State Department or some sort of organ within the DOJ. I don't mind an inquiry into that. Like, hey, listen.
How do you think that? What would you have done in the process of that investigation? What do you think the bare minimum would have been? Who would you want to get sworn testimony from?
I imagine anyone involved with the.
So give me some examples.
You could probably do, again, George Kent would be an example. The vice president's staff. I don't know what you would need to get sworn testimony from the vice president at the time. I don't know if the mere evidence of, or the mere appearance of impropriety would be enough to secure Joe Biden's sworn deposition.
You don't think that? So why wouldn't you interview?
I don't. Well, so Rob, hang on, real quick. Wait a minute. So Rob, let's be very clear here. I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is that certainly when you're seeking sworn statements of any figure, let alone the president, the vice president, you need more than just a mere inquiry. As far as I'm aware, to get, like, for example, written testimony from then President Trump during the Bob Mueller investigation, it wasn't like, hey, man, we're looking into this. It would need to be a formal, deep investigation with serious predicate and serious evidence to justify getting sworn statements from the sitting president or the then vice president.
You don't think this rises to the level?
No.
So you don't think so? Just to be clear, we impeached Donald Trump over a phone call, and your honest to goodness argument, if Trump would have came out, just real quick, if Trump would have came out and said, hey, I know that we've approved aid for this country, but they have a prosecutor that I think's corrupt. And so we're not going to give that aid that Congress approved until that prosecutor's fired. And then it turned out, oh, that prosecutor is looking at a company that Don Jr. is on the board of directors, you would have said, yeah, there doesn't need to be a thorough investigation.
No, I would say that. So, Rob, see, this is again the problem. I agreed that there should be some sort of inquiry or some sort of investigation. I just don't know what the proper organ for that would be. You said the FBI. I don't know if the FBI would get involved that early.
Should be
You're
a
also
special
confusing
counsel, is what it
impeachment.
should be.
Okay, well,
Because you want your own DOJ investigating your own administration, right?
I don't think that. So my understanding is that when you look at it, or when you have a special counsel, that it doesn't. That there still has to be some sort of predicate for it. It's not like like, for example, like the Durham investigation. My understanding is he didn't start out as a special counsel, right? Had to get to a certain level when he was granted special counsel privileges. So it's not like right out the gate you grant somebody special counsel. And again, I'm not an attorney, so I would need to know what those steps are. You're asking me to commit to Josiah. Do you think that there should be a special counsel investigation, or there should have been, into Joe Biden for this? No, because I don't know what the standards would be for that. I do agree that there should have been some sort of inquiry, because I think in good faith you can see the appearance of potential impropriety there, and that's all I'm willing to grant.
Did you support the Russiagate investigation? Do you think that it going into Trump's team supposedly colluding with Russia? Did you support that investigation?
I would have to go back and see what the predicate was for Crossfire Hurricane, because all I remember are the top line notes from it. I mean, Rob, again, sorry, this isn't something that I focus on exclusively. And that those investigations are years and years and years old, and they began under the Obama administration, if I remember correctly. So you're talking about 2016, 2015.
Right.
I can't remember what the exact predicate for that was.
But that's when this quid pro quo was, 2016.
But I prepped for this thing where we're talking about this.
The point
I'm more conversant on it.
But right.
So,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. You go ahead.
The point I'm trying to make is, again, it's not just a focus on Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. It's a focus on the fact that none of this was even touched. That the FBI, at the same time that they were spying on Trump's campaign, taking unverified opposition, because they could leave no stone unturned. The point is that it is a clear example of a double standard. And what you're saying is, well, yeah, it looks bad, and yeah, I don't have any proof that anyone ever looked into it.
Rob, if your beef is the double standard, I already agreed that this, but number one, looked bad. Number two, should have been looked into. So I don't understand what the problem is here.
So
we're not here to talk about the double standard. I'm sorry?
If it wasn't looked into, you would admit it's an example of a double standard.
It would look that way to me if it wasn't looked into at all.
That's a great concession. I'll take that.
But again, that's where I would have to go back and look at what these predicates were. See, this is the thing. We're talking about, when we had this conversation, you and I talked about whether or not the Devon Archer testimony was damning. Now, my understanding was that was in the context of impeaching Joe Biden. So that's what I'm here to talk about in terms of comparing it to Crossfire Hurricane, the Mueller investigation, the Durham investigation into Crossfire Hurricane. That's a separate issue for me, and I'm not going down those tangents because, again, I would need to prepare on what the specific predicates for all these things were, whether or not a special counsel should have been brought into this particular. I'm not prepared to commit to that. So,
okay. So then, having said that, you've already said that it would be a double standard if they didn't. That's fine. We'll leave it at that. The point I'm trying to make, the way we got into this conversation wasn't me saying it was a smoking gun or anything like that. I believe it was you. We were talking about Tony Boblinski's testimony, and I believe you said, I could be wrong, you can check me if I'm wrong, you said it's probably like Devon Archer's testimony that was like a nothing burger. That's what you said, right?
Yeah, I said that it was a nothing burger.
Yeah. So that's what the debate, I was like, would you like to talk about it? You said yes. Now, when you said nothing burger, to me, that didn't mean purely in the context of impeachment, right? Because what it means is we could understand, I think anyone in good faith could understand that when you have an executive branch agent that's using your tax dollars to force the firing of a prosecutor that's looking into his family's company, that's a huge deal. You've already admitted that it could look really bad. Right. So the problem is, what are the defenses as to why it wasn't what it looked like? Can you give me the defenses why this quid pro? I'll give you all the time in the world. You give me the defense of why this quid pro quo, even though it looks potentially shady.
So this is where so Rob, with all due respect, this is where you lose me. Okay. Because I went back and just looked at our chat. So I said, so you said, for the record, I think me and you have had a one-on-one debate. It was on vaccine mandates and parts. How'd that go for you? And I said about as well as the Biden impeachment inquiry is going for MAGA. So we were referring to the impeachment inquiry.
Okay.
You said it's going good. It's going good. The Biden impeachment inquiry is going good if you pay attention. The CHS is not looking good. It's not looking great, as I'll admit. But just a day or so, a business partner of James and Hunter Biden admitted Biden was involved in the business deals and was the big guy getting paid. I said, yeah, they dropped the transcript today. This is in reference to Bobulinski. So I plan on checking it out. The last bombshell was Devon Archer, and that one was a spectacular misfire. So I'm tempering expectations. And then I linked you to the Bobulinski thing and said, in case you don't have it. And you said Archer wasn't a misfire. It was also pretty damning. I'd happily debate you on it if you'd like. So clearly the reference was into the impeachment inquiry against President Biden.
Again, I don't take it as specifically to the impeachment, but that's fine. I could understand that that's how it would look. And it doesn't matter because we've talked about impeachment's political anyways, right? So this would be damning for the impeachment as well because it's a political process. So again, I'll go back to
let me ask you. So wait a minute. So I agree that it's a political process, but if your argument is anything is political, then by that definition, you would agree that the impeachment's efforts against Trump were also legitimate, right? Because anything can be political.
Well, the legitimate's in the eye of the beholder, sure.
But that's why I'm asking.
Within the legal process, sure.
So, but do you think that, number one, do you think that the impeachment inquiry against President Biden is legitimate? And two, do you think that the Devon Archer testimony legitimately serves that purpose? Because if your argument is, well, okay, so what specifically about the testimony is legitimately damning for this impeachment inquiry? Within the context of the impeachment, because that was my understanding is what we were going to talk about.
Right. So in order to talk about this, we need to lay the groundwork for why I think it's important. There are two things that I think would be impeachable. One is this quid pro quo, using your station as a politician to use U.S. tax dollars to fire a prosecutor that's looking into your son's company. That is impeachable unless you could give a credible defense as to why it isn't what it seems. The second is if when Joe Biden was vice president, that he was engaged in sort of pay for play, and then he lied about it, that would also be impeachable. So if Joe Biden was personally getting money from these business dealings, then and I will ask you both of those. Do you think both of those, forget about the criminal aspects of it, do you think both of those would be impeachable? One, if he forced the firing of a prosecutor looking into his son's company and he doesn't have a good reason for why he did it, would that be impeachable?
I think if you can prove that Joe Biden corruptly influenced the firing of a prosecutor investigating his son, yes, I do think that's impeachable. But I don't think that's what happened, and I don't think you have the evidence for it.
How would you prove that? Give me an example of proof that you would find. Do we need a written statement from Joe Biden saying that?
Well, that would be helpful, or some sort of record to that effect, or I mean
that's ludicrous.
But here's the problem, Rob. But here's the problem, Rob. Your standard is equally ludicrous because there's no evidence whatsoever.
That's not true. We have evidence.
Your standard is that Devon Archer says that there was a phone call made between Hunter and DC, according to Vadim, right? That Archer says that he wasn't even party to the phone call. It wasn't that it was on speakerphone. He has no record of the phone call itself. He wasn't present for it. And that Vadim told him Hunter called DC. And then a few days later, on a trip that was already pre-planned, then Vice President Biden pressured or made a public statement of pressure for the Ukrainian government to remove a corrupt prosecutor general that was already planned in advance. You actually need to provide evidence for your claims. Isn't it funny? Isn't it weird? Isn't evidence?
No, here's the problem, right? I have evidence. Here's my evidence. Ready? One, Joe Biden was the point person in dealing with corruption in Ukraine. Agree or disagree?
Yes. He was the highest ranking official dealing with it. Yeah.
Second, his son went to work for a company and an oligarch that Biden's team was saying was a corrupt Russian oligarch.
Okay.
Yeah. Third, there doesn't appear to be any gas expertise or anything like that that would justify these payments or Hunter Biden be hired by them. He wasn't a Ukrainian expert, didn't seem to have any expertise.
But again, we disagree because Archer himself says that Hunter was a skilled attorney, that he was a skilled lobbyist, that he worked with powerful law firms and public relation fields. So we disagree on that.
You're being it's nonsense, but fine, whatever. It's not important.
Okay.
Fourth, we know that from this testimony, in fact, we could skip the testimony of Devon Archer for now. Fourth, we know that Joe Biden issued a quid pro quo, and that quid pro quo was instrumental in getting the Ukrainian prosecutor fired.
But again, that's not
just yes or no. Do you agree?
That Joe Biden, I agree that Joe Biden leveraged congressionally approved aid to facilitate the ousting of Shokin.
Okay.
Or to at least attempt to do so at the bare minimum.
It worked.
Yeah.
Right? We know it worked. And then fifth.
We know he was removed, yes.
And fifth, after that removal, the new guy came in that initially the Biden team approved of, and that guy promptly buried the investigation, which was an incredible benefit to Zlochevsky and Burisma, the company Hunter Biden worked for. Agreed?
So my understanding is, and again, we're going to talk about the Devon Archer testimony, but my understanding is that according to Shokin's successor or his deputy, according to anti-corruption Ukrainian experts, that the investigation into Burisma was dead. We also have evidence that it was dead because the British unfroze, again, I can't remember what the figure was, tens of millions of pounds. So there is evidence to the contrary that the investigation was effectively destroyed.
Okay, so now that's my evidence. Right now, what we have is defenses, right? And here's the defenses that I've heard. One, no, Joe Biden didn't come up with this. Other people had talked about leveraging.
May I give you the defenses?
Yes, I asked what yours were, and I asked what yours were. So give me the defense. I'll give you all the time in the world. Give me the defense why this isn't what it seems. Go ahead.
Okay, so the firing of Viktor Shokin was something that was pursued as a matter of U.S. and EU policy. The trip in question in which Biden aggressively pushed for this was planned weeks before the phone call that allegedly took place between Hunter and D.C. Number three, again, that there's no evidence, or there is rather conflicting evidence, that the investigation into Burisma was going on. There was some evidence to indicate that it was effectively dead. Number four, Hunter Biden himself was not party to this investigation because it concerned a timeline that predated his employment by Burisma. All of these things seem pretty, I don't want to say exculpatory per se, but they certainly counteract or work against, I would argue, your claims to the contrary. And again, you have, there's no evidence itself that there was any call to leverage the foreign aid. That this, according to some evidence, that a State Department official was the one who came up with the idea. I know you have some evidence to the contrary that Vice President Biden was the one who came up with it. But what smoking gun is there? Because in the context of this conversation, you said the Archer testimony was damning. What is damning? Is it the phone call? Is that what was damning?
Okay, so there's the defenses you've given. The reason the Archer testimony is damning is because we have this situation outlined that looks really bad, that would be impeachable. But we've had these defenses, most of which are defenses you've given. You added a couple that I think are meaningless, but most of what we've heard. And the Archer testimony proves that those defenses are bullshit. So
how do they prove it's bullshit? Go ahead. I'm sorry, you're probably getting to that.
Right. So for example, when it says there's no evidence that Shokin was investigating, that's the crux of the defense. That's the biggest part of the defense, right? That actually this quid pro quo didn't matter because, if anything, this would have increased the chances of Burisma being investigated because the current prosecutor there was corrupt and he wasn't investigating. That's the narrative, correct? That's what we heard for years.
That is part of the defense.
Okay.
Yes.
If that's the case, then can you explain, unless Devon Archer is misremembering or lying, when he specifically says Zlochevsky told Hunter to call DC, which he assumed was his dad, because he was under pressure from Ukrainian government investigations, when the narrative has all along been there were no Ukrainian government investigations. They'd all stalled. Can you explain that?
No, he would either need to be misremembering, or Mykola Zlochevsky's feelings on the matter would have had to have been some sort of like paranoia or whatever else. But taking his words at face value, Zlochevsky clearly felt some sort of pressure from the Ukrainian government.
That's right. And so he would have an incentive to want that government changed, to want those investigations stopped. That's not just proven by the Devon Archer testimony, which finally puts the nail on that.
But again, but Rob, Rob, I want to be very clear about it. I'm not saying that you don't have any evidence. I'm saying that there's evidence to the contrary. I'm saying there's conflicting evidence. You seem to not believe that's the case.
Wait. So what I'm saying is, so we're going through, the reason that I say this testimony is damning is because I've outlined a situation, and it's not just me outlining. Even people like George Kent, you admit, said, holy cow, this looks bad, right? So we have this situation.
Well, he said it looked bad. My understanding was he said it looked bad that Hunter was ever employed by Burisma in the first place.
Correct.
Yeah.
That exactly. And so,
but that's not proof. But hang on, just to be clear, so we're not. You do agree that in and of itself is not, that George Kent is not alleging that there was some sort of inappropriate or corrupt conduct on Biden's part. Okay, fair enough.
I'm just saying that even people that are defending Biden admit, like, this is an icky situation, right? So I outlined a situation that I think that anyone should reasonably agree would be impeachable. Using taxpayer dollars to force the firing of a prosecutor
Rob,
looking at your son's company.
But here's where I'm confused. Wasn't this looked into?
Real quick.
I'm sorry.
Just let me.
Go
right.
ahead.
And so then we have these defenses, right? And if Devon Archer's testimony proves those defenses are garbage, which we just went through one. So the biggest defense was Shokin wasn't investigating, Ukrainian government wasn't investigating. That's out the window now. Because
No,
clearly,
it's not. No, it's
why
not.
isn't it?
No,
Why isn't it? Explain why it isn't.
because it's not proof that the investigations were ongoing. It is conflicting, or I should say, it is not conclusive proof that the investigations are ongoing. What it is proof of, if you take Devon Archer, and again, he wasn't under oath, but again, he was under the pains and penalties of perjury, so we have no reason to believe he's lying. From his recollection, that meant Mykola Zlochevsky or Vadim felt pressure from the Ukrainian government. That is proof that they felt pressure from the Ukrainian government. But again, there is evidence to the contrary that the investigation was de facto killed. You're saying that like it disproves the evidence that Shokin was not actively investigating Burisma, and I don't agree with that. I think it's conflicting evidence.
Well, there's specific evidence that we know in February of 2016, for example, that Shokin froze assets. There were contemporaneous reports that in April of 2015 that he was opening additional investigations into Burisma into the procurement of gas leases. But all of that's irrelevant anyways, because what matters is what Zlochevsky thought, because the potential wrongdoing here would be as follows. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? That Hunter Biden was working for this corrupt oligarch, and the corrupt oligarch was like, oh, I'm under pressure. Leverage your dad to get me out of this pressure. That would be the corruption.
Archer never says that. Archer never says that.
I'm saying hypothetically that would be the problem, right? That's why people are focused on this, right? And so the defense of that of Shokin wasn't investigating, the implicit reason that's a defense is, so therefore Zlochevsky wouldn't have felt pressured and would have had no incentive to tell Hunter Biden to go talk to his dad because there wasn't an investigation anyways. Even if I would concede, which I'm not, because there's great evidence, like the freezing of assets, that actually Shokin was investigating, the fact that Zlochevsky thought he was provided Zlochevsky the incentive. And it's not just Devon Archer's testimony. Again, I read you the email previously that
but
said...
Rob, just to nip this in the bud, I want to be clear. I don't doubt that Mykola Zlochevsky, if he felt genuine pressure from the Ukrainian government, and if that means specifically the prosecutor general's office, he would, if those things are true, have motive to try to get Shokin fired. I don't dispute that, but that's 3 links down the chain. That doesn't say anything about Hunter, let alone Joe.
Okay, but that takes out the defense of, well, the reason it was okay for Joe Biden to issue this quid pro quo and there's nothing nefarious going on here is because there was no investigation anyways. Zlochevsky disagrees.
No, that's not dispositive at all, because what if it's the case? Well, let's imagine a scenario in which, let's just like imagine the most reductive scenario. Hunter calls his dad and says, Dad, my boss thinks that he's feeling the heat, man. He's feeling the heat. We need to do something about this. And then what if Joe Biden looks into it and is like, actually, no, Burisma's not being investigated by Victor Shokin, which, by the way, is an impetus to get him fired. Like, in order for your claim to be true, Shokin would have actually needed to be investigating. That's one of the key components. Shokin would have actually needed. It doesn't matter what Zlochevsky felt personally. There would need to be a fact of the matter.
That's not true at all. Let's say that he wasn't investigating, but Zlochevsky thinks he is. And he says, I want you to call your dad and get Shokin fired. And Hunter says, okay. And so he calls his dad and he gets Shokin fired. Is it a defense to say, but wait a minute, Zlochevsky was wrong, Shokin wasn't? No, it would still be corrupt.
No, wait a minute. So, well, wait a minute. This could be a huge misunderstanding between. Are you telling me that there is a timeline in the multiverse, and you think we're living in it, where it's entirely possible that Zlochevsky's feelings were dead wrong? And one of the reasons that the State Department wanted Shokin fired was precisely because, as they say, he wasn't investigating Burisma. But the fact that Joe Biden received a phone call from his father or from his son to have Shokin fired, that's an impeachable offense for something that Biden was going to do anyway.
You have no evidence that Joe Biden...
No, wait a minute. I'm just asking. No, I understand. But I'm asking, is that your belief? Is that your understanding?
No. What I'm saying is, if Zlochevsky was mistaken, hypothetically, which it's absurd to think he was. He's so paranoid that he thinks there's investigations going on that aren't. It's ludicrous, right? But if that were the case, it could still be. Are you legitimately telling me that if Zlochevsky was wrong and said, Hunter Biden, call your dad to fire Victor Shokin, and Biden says, sure, son, and if it'll help you in your business, that's what I'll do, that wouldn't be corrupt? That it would be defensive? That would be corrupt. Yes. So the point I'm making is, it is clear, despite all of the claims that we've heard to the contrary back home, that have said, no, there's nothing to see here with this quid pro quo, because actually Shokin wasn't investigating anyways. That's not true according to Zlochevsky. One, we could see that he was investigating, but second, even if we didn't,
with respect,
the person
Rob,
that
again,
matters, the person that matters, who, if whether or not they thought there was an investigation, was Zlochevsky. Because
no, I, with respect, I would argue the opposite. It would be Joe Biden who matters most in terms of
Why?
if he thought that there was going to be an investigation. Because in order for him to commit an impeachment, in my opinion, Joe Biden would have committed an impeachable offense at the time he was vice president if he took action to benefit his son with that express purpose. It sounds like what you're saying is if Joe Biden is doing something that incidentally benefits his son and is doing it for the exact opposite reason that Hunter Biden is making the call, that's still an impeachable offense.
No,
that's insane to me.
You actually,
if Joe Biden's walking into this, I'm going to try to get Shokin fired. Let's just let me lay it out here. Joe Biden walks into the situation saying, I'm going to try to get Viktor Shokin fired because I think he's corrupt and lazy and he's not dealing with Ukrainian corruption. And Hunter Biden says, I also want you to get Viktor Shokin fired, but because my boss thinks that Shokin is investigating him. If Joe Biden goes ahead and gets Shokin fired anyway, I don't think that's corrupt. Not inherently. He would need to be doing it for the reason to benefit his son.
So just to be clear, so what you're saying is hypothetically, if we have a president or vice president, that there are people around him saying, you should fire this guy. You should get him fired because we think he's corrupt. But then there's also potentially a personal motivation. Like his son comes to him and says, yes, I also want him fired because it would help me. You're saying that that wouldn't be corrupt or evidence that would need an investigation if he went ahead with the fire because it would just be incidentally helping his son?
I think in your hypothetical, it could look shady. I don't think it's an impeachable offense. I think it would need to look into. And let me say this. If what we have, which is what I believe we have, a situation in which Joe Biden was trying to get a guy fired long before that goddamn phone call, which allegedly took place, and Joe Biden takes steps to get that guy fired, then especially if the phone call took place and the reason for Biden trying to get the guy fired is the exact opposite reason for why Hunter says get Shokin fired because he's investigating my boss's company. He's not investigating your boss's company. As a matter of fact, that's part of the reason why we're trying to fire him, because your boss's company is corrupt as fuck and he's not being investigated. No, I don't think that there's anything inherently corrupt about it. You would need to prove that Joe Biden took deliberate action influencing U.S. policy to benefit his son against U.S. policy. That's my thing.
You think there should have been? You've already said you don't think there should have been a special counsel. Did you agree with this?
Oh, no. Wait, Rob. No, I'm even not saying that. I'm just saying I don't know. I could conceive of a time.
Okay,
special counsel.
Let me ask you this. I know you're going to say this is off topic, but just hypothetically, did you think once Trump fired Comey, did you agree with the appointment of special counsel?
Did he fire? Was that the one where he said, "I'm looking for loyalty"?
He fired James Comey. He fired the FBI director, James Comey.
I don't think simply firing an FBI director, the FBI director serves at the pleasure of the president. I don't think simply firing an FBI director merits any sort of investigation.
Okay, well then you disagree with the Mueller report. You disagree with the Mueller investigation. That's great. I will tell you this: Democrats disagree. And let me finish. Democrats disagree.
Wait a minute.
Please let me finish.
Rob, hang on. Rob, you just said I disagreed with the. Are you telling me that if I go look back, the only reason that Crossfire Hurricane occurred was because the president
you're thoroughly confused. Crossfire Hurricane was an FBI investigation. Mueller was a special counsel. The reason for the appointment of the special counsel was the firing of James Comey, because James Comey was heading the FBI. So, right? Okay. Do you agree with the appointment? Once he fired Comey, did you agree with the appointment of Bob Mueller as a special counsel? Not him specifically, but the appointment of a special counsel.
I do not agree that a special counsel should be appointed for the president simply firing an FBI director, unless we had reason to believe that it was corrupt.
Okay, so the exact rationale that you just said wouldn't be corrupt is why they appointed it for Trump, and I'll explain why. Because what you're saying in this case of Burisma is, well, let's say that Hunter Biden and Burisma wanted Shokin gone, but the State Department and other people wanted Shokin gone for other reasons, then it wouldn't be corrupt or warrant a special counsel for Joe Biden to go ahead and go through with that. But with Trump's team, Democrats wanted Comey fired. Republicans wanted Comey fired. Rod Rosenstein at the FBI actually wrote a memo saying that Comey should be fired. And yet, when Trump fired Comey, do you want to know what the Democrats' argument was that justified the special counsel? They said, even if other people had reasons to want James Comey gone, the fact that it could have personally benefited Donald Trump and he could have had personal motivations proves that we need a special counsel. Why wouldn't that same please let me finish real quick. Why wouldn't that same rationale apply here? Where even if other people wanted Shokin fired for what they perceived as legitimate reasons, if it would have benefited Joe Biden's son, which is what you're talking about, if that's what Joe Biden's son wanted.
Number one, I think these things are apples and oranges. So let me again say this. So I think that if they had reason to believe that Donald Trump fired James Comey for corrupt purposes, that it would merit some sort of inquiry / investigation. I am not prepared to say special counsel or not special counsel, and I'm not prepared to debate the timeline because I can't remember how the special counsel was appointed. I don't know what the steps were between firing James Comey and special counsel appointed, and I'm not prepared to talk about it now, number one. Which is number two, why I also said that if somebody wanted to look into why Joe Biden tried to have Victor Shokin fired, I'm fine with that. I'm just, again, same thing, perfectly consistent, not prepared to commit to a special counsel because I said that you can glance at that in good faith and see potential impropriety. Where you jump the shark, in my humble opinion, is you don't say, hey, look, this looks kind of shady. Maybe we should look at it. You're saying, no, the motherfucker should be impeached. And I just disagree because I don't think that the evidence is there.
The reason he should be impeached is because there are defenses that he's provided that turned out to not be true. For example, his defense that I never talked to any of these business associates. We know that's not true.
And you'll send me that link, right? Because what I remember was that I had nothing to do. He said something to the effect of I had nothing to do with my son's business dealings.
I'll see if I
can. Again, you don't have to send it now, but you'll be sure to send me that, please, sometime tonight. Okay, appreciate it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And then we see because the situation, when there is, it's not the same as a crime, right? Impeachment, which we're agreeing on. When you see something that looks so bad, and again, the standard for impeachment has been lowered significantly after the last two. When you see something that looks so bad, you then need an adequate defense as to why you wouldn't be impeached. And when that defense falls apart, so again, the best answer was there was no investigation. Shokin wasn't investigating. Not only can we see that there was an investigation because he was freezing assets and things of that nature, but Zlochevsky himself admitted, yes, I'm under pressure from these Ukrainian investigations. That's what the Devon Archer testimony showed us. That is a huge blow to the defense. The other defenses that you said, we can go through them one by one. It was US-EU policy. Show me one person contemporaneously saying to leverage aid to fire Victor Shokin.
I have no evidence that there was a contemporary evidence at the time saying leverage the foreign aid. I just still don't understand why that's the game changer there. If that is a tool to affect the U.S., let me put it to you like this: we do have contemporaneous evidence that the U.S. State Department, Republican politicians, I think Senator Ron Johnson's a good example, where he also wrote a letter demanding major reforms in the Prosecutor General's office. I think he even called out Shokin by name, saying this guy needs to
That's not contemporaneous. That was after the quid pro quo.
It was sorry. So it was before Shokin's firing then, though, right?
What's that? No,
Ron Johnson and Senate
it was after the quid pro quo. I believe that letter was in March. Also, that letter
was it before his firing? Because otherwise the letter wouldn't have made any sense.
I don't know if it was.
That's fine.
I think it was after the firing was weird because he resigned and then he didn't resign.
May I ask you? That's fine. Will you dispute that Senate Republicans also wanted major reforms in the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office and probably also wanted Shokin to be fired?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I'm so sorry. It went out for a second.
No, it's okay. Do you dispute that Senate Republicans also wanted major reforms in the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office and wanted Shokin to be fired?
They said afterwards, based on the Johnson letter, if you read it, they're talking about reports they're getting from sort of the team that was leading the investigation, which is the Biden team. And they're saying, yeah, it looks like there was corruption. So they're saying at that point, after the quid pro quo, they're fine with it. But there's no evidence beforehand that they ever suggested this quid pro quo. None.
Okay, I'll go back. I'll go back and check. So wait a minute. So we do have contemporaneous evidence that the United States State Department, at the bare minimum, wanted major reforms in the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office. Again, to me, the leveraging of aid, that would be a vector by which to achieve that goal. You're saying it's so novel and so extraordinary that that in and of itself merits an impeachable offense. I don't get that. I don't understand. I don't understand why I would need, I suppose, evidence that
But
even though
again,
according to George Kent, it exists.
So
According to George Kent, it
this
exists.
is it's a clever sleight of hand. I'm not saying you're doing this intentionally, but think about this. So we could take any Soviet bloc country, probably any country in Africa, any country in the Middle East,
Sure.
and dozens of other countries around the world and say, in general, there is, quote, corruption there, right? We could say that about Mexico, right? You could say, yes, there's legal corruption in Mexico. And there will be people in the United States, politicians, et cetera, that say, we would like reforms to ensure that that corruption's not going down, right? We would like that. That's what we would like. And you're saying, therefore, Joe Biden issuing a quid pro quo. And you've already admitted, no time in history do you ever recall the United States conditioning aid on the firing of a prosecutor. Heck, let's take the conditioning aid out of it. Do you have any example of the United States ever demanding the firing of a prosecutor without conditioning aid? Do you have any evidence of that?
I have no idea.
Right.
No.
So the idea that people said general statements, and they were saying it since well before Shokin, we want reforms. There was an EU memo. If I was at my home computer, I could find it for you. But it was from some European, I think it was the EU, that was talking about sending aid. And this memo came out, I believe, in late October or November, that was glowing about how the prosecutor general's office was making significant reforms to corruption. And their recommendation was to continue to send aid. There is no contemporaneous evidence anywhere where someone is saying we should stop sending aid unless Victor should. So I'm sorry. So far, the defense of there was no investigation, that defense is shattered because Zlochevsky thought so. The idea that this was prior US-EU policy, that's shattered because you can't show one piece of evidence that says that anyone was talking about conditioning aid to fire Shokin.
Wait, when did I say it was prior? Well, wait a minute. I said that wanting major reforms in the firing of Shokin, that was U.S. policy. Conditioning aid, that may very well be novel.
When was the first time that they talked about firing Victor Shokin?
Wasn't that in the
November State Department
memorandum?
memo. Right.
Wasn't it in the November? Yeah.
Right.
Oh, okay.
When we know that, and again, we have the email also from November where we could see that Vadim is telling Hunter and Devon Archer, we want you to reach out to your contacts in the U.S. government. And we want you to ultimately have them agree with Zlochevsky with the ultimate goal of shutting down investigations in Ukraine into Zlochevsky. And then
if you don't mind, at the end, send me that link too.
Yeah, I can send you that. I actually have that pulled up. Where do you want it? X? Can I just send it to you in X?
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. So again, it's not, and phone, like even in George Kent's October speech, he talks about being willing to work with prosecutor general, right? So again, the idea, the situation we've outlining where it clearly was and here's the other part, and this is what you can't get around. You can't get around the fact that this quid pro quo and the force firing of Shokin absolutely benefited Burisma. It absolutely benefited Hunter Biden's employers. You can't get around that. It did. Do you agree?
Sorry, I'm reading this thing here, Rob, that you sent, the email.
You're going to want to go down to where it says Eric D. Sherwin from Vadim. I think it's the bottom of page 1. My only concern is for us to be on the same page regarding our final goals. With this in mind, I'd like us to formulate a list of deliverables, including but not limited to a concrete course of action, including meetings, communications resulting in high-ranking U.S. officials in Ukraine, such as the U.S. ambassador, and in the U.S., publicly or in private communications expressing their positive opinion and support of Nikola, who's Zlochevsky, and Burisma, to the highest level decision makers here in Ukraine, the president of the Ukraine, the president of the chief of staff, the prosecutor general, who's Victor Shokin. The scope of the work should also include a visit of a number of widely recognized and influential current and former U.S. policymakers to Ukraine in November, aiming to conduct meetings with and to bring positive single message in support of Zlochevsky's issue to bring Ukrainian top officials up. Real quick, let me finish for the audience. Sure. To bring Ukrainian top officials above with the ultimate purpose to close down any cases pursuits against Zlochevsky in Ukraine. So once more evidence that the original defense of, well, there were no investigations going in is not true. And once Shokin got out, you cannot deny this is the timeline. Biden said the guy that came in was good. Then all of a sudden, the guy that came in lets Burisma off the hook. And clearly Burisma felt that way because Zlochevsky, who had fled the country, comes back start celebrating. And then once that case was dropped, not a peep from Joe Biden or George Kent publicly saying, wait a minute, we're not going to give aid until this prosecutor's fired. They had huge problems with apparently Urema and Shokin. They talked about it all the time. George Kent in his October speech specifically, I believe, talked about how under Urema, the predecessor, that they weren't going after Shokin. And so this British case had to be dropped because the prosecutors in Ukraine weren't going after Shokin. All of a sudden, their criticism stopped once the investigation was finally dropped. No more suggesting of conditioning aid on firing prosecutors because they were corrupt. All of a sudden, they didn't care about it.
Okay. So here's what I'll say. We have 13 minutes left. So here's my final situation. I'll give you the final word.
Okay.
So regarding what you said here, and then I'm going to address the Devon Archer thing. So I'm going to address exactly what you just said, then the Devon Archer testimony, and then we're going to you can have the last word on all of it. So that email does not talk about firing Victor Shokin. Unless I'm mishearing, my understanding was that is what you suggested that the email said. That
No,
the
not at
email
all.
was pushing for the firing of Victor Shokin.
That's not what
So
I said. I said specifically that they said the goal was to shut down investigations from Ukraine, the Ukrainian government,
Okay.
into Zlochevsky and
Okay.
Burisma.
So yes, and the email does say that. I agree with you there. But number two,
Real quick, can I ask you, did that work?
did a what?
Once Hunter and them started reaching out to DC and this prosecutor was fired, was their goal achieved?
It happened after the phone call, but again, see, this is the problem, Rob. You make a causal relationship between these things. So my understanding is, so you're telling me the request in the email must have worked because Hunter Biden, at Vadim's request, called DC, which means his father, and then his father changed U.S. policy to fire Victor Shokin at the behest of his son. You are inferring a causal relationship between all of these links that you have no evidence for. I agreed with you that it looks kind of sus, but you are making the claim that it is proven, and it's proven to the extent that the president should be impeached. This is where you lose me. Hang on, because you're going to get the final word. You're going to get the final word.
I'm sorry.
So a couple of things. So as far as I'm concerned, the earliest evidence that I have at my disposal is that contemporaneous email from the State Department, which was also in November. I believe Pisco and others have said it actually predates that, but I don't have that information at my disposal.
He's talking to you right now. Tell him to come on.
No. It's just me and my notes that I have here. But so set that aside. We know that trip was planned in advance. This is how I look at the whole situation. This is why I think that the Devon Archer testimony is a nothing burger. So for me, based on my review of the testimony, it confirms that number one, Hunter Biden was not sought out by Burisma. He was sought out by Devon Archer because Devon Archer had been acquainted with him in the past, because he'd worked with him in the past. They'd done great work together. He testifies in the deposition. He says that Hunter is a great attorney. He's a great lobbyist. He works and hobnobs with these powerful law firms and would be a value add to Burisma. He did say that part of the value add was also his powerful last name, which I don't dispute, but I don't think that Joe Biden is morally or ethically culpable for his son, number one, sharing his last name, and two, trying to implicitly leverage that last name. He also says he has no evidence that Joe Biden engaged in any sort of corrupt activities whatsoever. The times that, Hunter Biden put his father on speakerphone, they never talked business, according to Devon Archer. Never. It was only ever about pleasantries and things of that nature. So again, I don't think that that's particularly damning, especially when they talked every day, particularly in the situation going on with Beau Biden and Beau Biden's disease, and the fact that they were just a relatively close family in the first place, given Hunter's history of addiction. Okay, so nothing particularly damning there. The inference about the brand and the phone call, Devon Archer says he wasn't there for the phone call. He also doesn't even say that Vadim said that Hunter called Joe Biden, just that he called DC. He also goes on in the testimony to talk at length how there are other PR firms and Blue Star Strategies and Boyd Schiller and others working and interfacing with organs of the U.S. government. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure Devon Archer also says that in various instances, Hunter Biden had to operate through middlemen. Like, for example, I think there was an issue about a visa for Mykola or Vadim, and the visa wasn't even granted, and Hunter Biden had to work with again, people in DC to interface with the Department of Homeland Security, and he didn't get the visa. So this idea that Hunter Biden was some sort of like all-powerful fairy godmother to Mykola Zlochevsky just doesn't seem to be the case. He also, Devon Archer says, that Hunter Biden felt that he had to be very fastidious about the law and about not breaking the law, and making it clear to Devon Archer that he could not direct his father's activities or his schedule. So for me, the Devon Archer testimony is not particularly damning, especially when you get to Goldman questioning him at the end and you get further clarification. Well, I think Hunter was trying to sell the illusion of access. I have no evidence that actual access was given. When being presented with the Senate minority's report from the 2019-2020 Senate investigation into Joe and Hunter Biden. And it talks about how Vice President Biden acted scrupulously, and there's no evidence whatsoever that he influenced foreign policy on behalf of his son or acted corruptly on behalf of his son. Devon Archer says, yeah, I don't disagree with that. I have no evidence to the contrary. To me, within the context of the Biden impeachment, this thing was a dud. And it was also, these answers were given with the fact that Archer was at risk of pains and penalties of perjury. So to me, it was a nothing burger. As far as the rest of it goes, again, certainly aspects of this look sus. I think that's been my position from the beginning. But I don't think it rises to an impeachable offense against the president of the United States. That's my position. You get the final word on all of it.
Okay, I do appreciate the final word, so thank you on that.
Yeah.
I think that everything you said doesn't prove that something's a nothing burger. For example, if there's testimony that says one of the defenses of Joe Biden or the Biden associates is X, and my testimony disproves X, but I'm also saying that I don't have further proof. I never sat in the room while Hunter Biden told his dad change this policy. I've already explained why that would be the case. You would want to insulate yourself. I doubt that either Joe or Hunter Biden, if these hypothetical conversations about business were going on, would want other people into the room. So the idea that Devon Archer didn't know would make sense. What we see is that their original defense of Joe Biden, which all the defenses you were given, just doesn't hold up when we look at it. The original defense of the reason it was okay, actually the original defense was something that you started to go in line with, which was actually they wanted Joe fired because he wasn't investigating corruption like Burisma. So Joe Biden was gung-ho to have his son's company investigated more. It was always nonsensical. That was always a nonsensical position. But the defense that there was no investigation going on proves that that's not true. And even if you say, well, Devon Archer's testimony didn't prove that, what it did prove was the guy who would have had an incentive, who hired Hunter Biden to pressure DC, even if you say he hired him for the illusion of access, he felt the Ukrainian government was investigating him. He felt that there was something going on, that the investigation wasn't dead. And he told Hunter to reach out and to get those investigations killed. And that's exactly what happened. Hunter Biden did make a call, and it looks like Devon Archer says, yeah, it was to his dad. And he would know because he knows the way they talk when they would say, call DC. That's why he made this assumption, right? But even if that portion wasn't there, the most damning portion is Devon Archer. It's the first time that we heard directly from Zlochevsky that he felt that the Ukrainian government was investigating him. All of a sudden, the story looks way worse if the story is Shokin and the Ukrainian government is investigating Burisma and the vice president's son's on the board. And then the vice president comes out and issues a quid pro quo with $1 billion tax dollars to fire that prosecutor. And then that prosecutor gets fired. And then the new guy comes in and he massively benefits Burisma. He ends the investigation. Burisma goes back to work. Zlochevsky comes back to the country and declares victory. That looks even worse. That looks 10 times worse. And that certainly rises to the level of impeachment. Laughably, it seems as if the only standard of evidence that Pondering is willing to accept is a confession by Hunter or Joe Biden. There was not an investigation that rose to the level of anything similar what was going on against Donald Trump. There was never testimony taken under oath of Joe Biden or Hunter Biden or Devon Archer or Viktor Shokin or Poroshenko or anyone else that would be intimately involved with this, even Vadim or Zlochevsky potentially. They didn't do any of that. They didn't subpoena bank records, none of it. The story was almost completely buried until the impeachment started to come up of Donald Trump. And then that's when we started to hear about the story again. So that's what makes this testimony damning. I agree with Pondering. It would have been more damning if Hunter or if Archer would have said, yes, I personally heard Hunter Biden talk about these things to his father. But not having that doesn't mean that the testimony isn't a huge blow. And based on the impeachment standards that we've seen of impeaching Trump for a phone call, everyone listening knows that if this was the exact same situation, but it was the Trump family instead of the Biden family, that the Democrats would have went insane. The allegation here is far more serious than anything Trump was impeached for or accused of, that they went after his entire administration. It's way more evidence because we could see the literal outcomes. The evidence is Hunter Biden was there. Joe Biden offered the quid pro quo. The quid pro quo benefited. A couple of this little cleanup things that I didn't get. So again, as Pondering had to admit, there was no contemporaneous any claims whatsoever until November about even firing Shokin, and there was none at all. In fact, we saw the opposite. The EU members were saying, actually, we think that corruption's being cleaned up. We recommend giving more aid. We have admission from an associate that was on the plane of Biden's that it was Joe Biden himself that came up with the quid pro quo. We have an admission that this massively benefited Burisma. We have an admission that at least Zlochevsky felt that he was being investigated. Just a couple other things. He says,
no, you're good, buddy. You're fine.
He said the trip was planned before. I don't understand how that's a defense of this. Right, the trip was planned before. That's statecraft. He planned to go talk to Poroshenko. He was probably like any person from the United States that ever dealt with Ukraine was going to mention corruption. But this was the first time that he was going to tell him fire Shokin and use a quid pro quo to do it, which ultimately, don't forget, led to a massive benefit for Burisma. In fact, Ken Vogel in the New York Times was reporting in 2019, quote, Zlochevsky's allies were relieved by the dismissal of Shokin, the prosecutor whose ouster Mr. Biden had sought, according to people familiar. Shokin wasn't aggressively pursuing investigations into Burisma, but they say, the allies, say that Shokin was using threat of prosecution to solicit bribes from Zlochevsky and his team. And the left, that oligarch's team leery. Mr. Shokin was replaced by Lutsenko, who the former vice president later called someone who was solid at the time. Zlochevsky's representatives were pleased by the choice, concluding they could work with Lutsenko to resolve the oligarch's legal issues. So their stance, what they're admitting to, and this is, we didn't get into this, but it could be that Shokin sucked and was just threatening Burisma. He was threatening for bribes. That shit happens in Ukraine. Nonetheless, the Burisma, Zlochevsky wanted this dude gone. And he was telling Hunter and them to reach out to DC. And as soon as he told them, his dad took the unprecedented step, which has never happened in U.S. history, to my knowledge, to not only suggest firing an individual prosecutor, but to condition $1 billion of your tax dollars in aid in doing so. And then predictably, just like these people in Burisma told Ken Vogel, the reporter at the New York Times, we knew that would work out for us. We knew that we would get the investigations closed. And that's exactly what happened. The other point that the only other defense that Pondering's offered here is that Hunter wasn't there in the times they were investigating, but that's nonsensical. One, just because an investigation is looking at a particular time doesn't mean that they can't come up with crimes later. So, for example, we know that Hunter wasn't paying taxes on this money. So Hunter would have stood to be punished in the United States had this investigation came to fruition and it came out that he was getting these monies and he wasn't reporting them. And Hunter was operating as a foreign lobbyist, which he still hasn't been charged for. And Hunter was making massive amounts of money, which would mean that he wouldn't want this deal closed for him. So the idea is the investigation was centered around gas leases in 2014 doesn't mean that it couldn't have expanded and the Bidens wouldn't have had interest personally. The last thing I'll say is, even though we have direct allegations that Joe Biden received money, at least from James Biden, they called it a loan, but a company pays James Biden $200,000, and then the next day or 2 days later, he sends a check to Joe Biden for that exact amount, and then writes loan on it. And Democrats are like, well, that's good enough for us. And then when asked the Biden administration, can we see the paperwork on that loan? They're like, no, you can't. But we're supposed to just believe that. By the way, the only reason I bring this up is we don't need to have money directly going to Joe Biden to prove that he benefited. Pondering, I'll end my statement here. If I could just ask you a question. You don't have any kids, but you have a girlfriend, right?
I do.
And presumably family, mom, dad, or if someone passed away, I apologize. But
yeah, no, it's okay. You're okay, buddy. Yeah.
Do you think that for me, I have a son, I have a wife, like to me, their well-being is more important than mine. So I could do something corruptly to benefit them without personally getting money, and it would still be corrupt. It would still be to my personal benefit for my family to be enriched. So all of it.
So to answer your question, yes, I think you can act corruptly even if you don't directly benefit. I think you can act corruptly on behalf of loved ones, 100%.
Yeah. So the point that I'm making is, again, my focus is the double standard. There was not a contemporary investigation by the FBI or any other entity. There was not demands by Democrats or even Republicans that there needed to be a massive investigation. The reason this separates from like Kushner's and things like that. Look, I understand that everybody is shit in Washington and their families are crap and they're leveraging political things to make money. What makes this unique is that Biden was providing access, it seems, and he took an action that massively benefited his son and his company. And it was an unprecedented action, and he has never even once had to testify to his reasons as such. And all of the defenses that have been given fall flat.
Rob, I wanted to ask you, I wanted to save about 10 minutes to ask you questions about something completely different, like fine. Mitch McConnell's firing and stuff. So I'll give you another 10 seconds if you want.
I'm done. That's it.
Perfect. Cool. So obviously we fundamentally disagree, and obviously I appreciate the conversation. It is fun sparring with you, even though obviously I know you think my politics are shit. I think yours are shit. But it's fun to spar about this stuff. Yeah. So couple of things. Mitch McConnell's retiring. What do you think about that?
Mitch is terrible. It's not. See,
wait a minute. Is he fuck?
What?
Hang on 1 second. Can you all hear Rob? Go ahead, Rob. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Mitch is terrible. Look, I'm not. We talked about this earlier, but I'm more concerned about corruption. I think that there's basically a uniparty at the top, right? And I think that that's why so much of this corruption goes against Trump and it goes to the benefit. That's the two-tier system we see. It's because the Republican leadership would rather be big fish in small pond than lose their party to a populist like Trump. Mitch McConnell is someone that represents that old guard, and he hates Trump and he hates populists, and he ain't going to like Vivek. He ain't going to like DeSantis. He's not going to like any of those people. And so he represents the Paul Ryan, the Mitt Romneys, the wing of the Republican Party that I don't like.
Who do you think will take his place?
It's a difficult question. I haven't thought about it much today because I've been working all day.
I haven't either. They say John Thune, I think, is his lieutenant, the minority whip. What do you think about that?
Yes, that's. I don't know as much about Thune. I don't like that pick. For me, I would want the person I would want would be Rand Paul, but it's clearly not going to be him. And anyone who's sort of more in my vein, don't get it twisted. They're going to put someone who is very similar to Mitch McConnell there. Someone that the donors like, someone that the neocons, their number one concern will continue to be sending money to foreign militaries around the world.
Gotcha. In terms of, because I know you talk a lot about double standards, these are things that are important to you. What would you like to see with respect to the standard established for Democrats and Republicans, Trump and Biden? I assume that you don't take the position, for example, that Trump is beyond investigation, that you believe that Trump is subject to investigation and scrutiny like everybody else. Are there any, even if you disagree with the outcome, are there any of the investigations into Trump that you think are at least merited, even if you don't think they would or should result in a conviction?
It
could be any of the indictments against him, or it could be any of like Crossfire, it could be anything.
It depends on what you mean by merited. So here's what I'll say. A lot of the stuff that Trump's being looked in, for example, the classified documents, I actually have no problem if they want to convict Trump on that. The problem I have is it's one of the worst kept secrets in Washington that classified documents are mishandled all the time by all sorts of people, right? And so my issue with it is I have been consistent. I spoke up contemporaneously that I did not think Hillary Clinton should be charged, because I felt that even though I suspect heavily that the reason she had that private server was to hide information from Freedom of Information Act requests and things like that, I can't prove that. And the crime of mishandling classified information, I'm sorry. Now, the crime of deleting subpoenaed evidence, someone should have been charged with that, which they weren't, which is bullshit. That someone should have been. But the actual Hillary Clinton being charged for mishandling classified, I feel the same about Joe Biden. I feel the same about Donald Trump. But if you were to say to me, no, we're going to start prosecuting that stuff, I would say that's fine. I have no problem prosecuting all of the people that do that. The problem I have is all of these cases, right down to the one you just saw with the real estate business, these are crimes that are done all the time. And it's clear that Trump is being targeted because he's Trump. And this is no different to me. The analogy I would use is when we had racist police departments in the South during the Jim Crow era, and they might say, well, that black guy was speeding. And you might say, you never pull white people over. All you do is pull black people. And most of the time, the black people are driving much safer than the white people. But continuously, you let the white people go and you only arrest the black people. And the police would say, so what? That's whataboutism. This guy was speeding. That's what we need to focus on.
How do you
That's
factor in prosecutorial discretion? Because presumably you recognize that will always play a role, given that there's not a single prosecutor and not AI, right? That certain prosecutors will take certain prosecuting decisions and others won't.
Mm-hmm.
What is acceptable to you? Like, I guess, does it mean, so I feel that there's some people on both sides who will say, okay, if you prosecute somebody on this party, you're obligated to prosecute somebody on this party, that it has to be equal balance. That's never how prosecutions ever worked. So to what extent do you factor prosecutorial discretion in?
The problem with prosecutorial discretion is when you see an obvious pattern. So if it was just a one-off, maybe it would be okay. But I could talk to you
Right. You see a very clear where it goes. Yeah. Okay.
And here's the problem, right? Would you admit, I don't know if you know this, I don't know how closely you followed the IG report on the Hillary Clinton email investigation and then Crossfire Hurricane, but it seems clear
was that
to
the
me,
Durham?
No, Durham was after that. Durham was a special prosecutor.
Oh, you're talking about Horowitz?
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
It clearly showed that top brass on the top floor of the FBI had a bias against Trump. Over and over and over. The question was, did that bias influence their decision?
Sure.
So the problem is when you're admitting, well, there could be prosecutor discretion, and it's done by a bunch of people in institutions that don't like one side and like the other. I mean, again, you could go back to Chuck Schumer saying that once Trump started criticizing the FBI and the intel agencies, he said on Rachel Maddow's show before Trump was sworn in, that's ridiculously dumb because they'll find 6 ways of Sunday at getting back at him. And so when you see that that's exactly what happened, all of a sudden, they broke the law to spy on Trump's team with FISA warrants, and they opened this massive Russiagate investigation based on.
So you allow for, I'm sorry, because I have other questions, but to be clear, so you allow for prosecutorial discretion. You just think we've gone way past that.
Of course, if we have institutions that have an incentive to take down one, for example, let's say you ran on defunding the FBI. Right?
No, I take your point. I was just, I suppose I was wanting to see what your expectations were, because I think some people have like this absurd, like artificial balance where, again, so-and-so indicts a Republican, therefore we're obligated to find something on a Democrat to indict to create this illusion of equality.
I'll ask the quickest question to you, right? Like, we both agree prosecutor discretion is necessary because, like, the guy's speeding and then you pull him over and he's driving his wife who's pregnant. Of course, the police have the discretion to say, yeah, we're not going to charge you, right? But my question to you would be the following. Like, do you think that we should, when we're talking about people running for president or president, that the bar should be higher?
Yes, 100%.
Do you think that bar was met with most of the
investigations with Trump? I mean, I hold him to a higher standard. I'm sure legally it's supposed to be the same exact standard, right? But yes, I think that just as a general principle, you should hold presidential,
like, to get FISA warrants,
people's in power,
right? Like, for the FBI to get FISA warrants to spy on a political campaign for president and then the president's team, that bar should be very high, right?
I think it should be at least as high as it would be for anybody else. And we know that there were issues with the FISA process with respect to Donald Trump. So what about the Supreme Court just said today also, and speaking of big news, that they would take up the immunity case against Donald Trump. What's your position on criminal presidential immunity?
It's difficult. I probably disagree with Trump, to be honest with you. I understand why they should be immune from civil liability, but I have a difficult time thinking that the presidents should be immune from criminal liability. Now, I think the argument, while their president is more sound, right? That seems to be
because you can't, that's the OLC opinion, right? The idea that you can't charge a sitting president,
right?
You can't prosecute a sitting president. I agree. Just to be clear, that's one thing I feel that it makes sense to offer some degree of limited, pretty high immunity for the president of the United States, since they are effectively a branch unto themselves, right? That's the logic that the Supreme Court granted, and I can't remember, it was a Supreme Court case with Nixon. I think it was US v. Nixon, where that's why they granted him the civil protections. Well, what about the argument though that, okay, Rob, he doesn't get absolute immunity, right? It's not like he's sovereign because he can be impeached first. I don't think that's adequate enough. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do think there is a legal theory to that, and it's something that the Supreme Court should weigh in. I would guess that it'll be a 6-3 or so, that he doesn't have complete criminal immunity,
Yeah.
but they definitely need to weigh in. I mean, there is an argument, right, that like the way the founders saw it, that you needed a president that could make this, because the obvious counterexample that people are going to bring up is, well, what about that American that Obama droned, right? Now, as an American, you have a right to a fair trial. You're innocent until proven guilty. You can't just extrajudicially murder American citizens, but Obama did, right? And so you can raise, you could be like, but if Obama doesn't have that authority, and let's say that there's hypothetically a incoming terrorist attack, and there's an American there, so what? He doesn't have the right to declare a missile strike? And so I understand the argument. It gets into murky ground, and I would
more like a chilling effect potentially. Even if the president wouldn't be prosecuted, perhaps they might think to themselves, "Fuck, I could be prosecuted for this, therefore I will not do it."
That's right.
Yeah,
now that might ultimately be a good thing, because I feel that the executive has way too much power right now. In that, we don't need Congress.
Nobody would dispute war. That. Jesus, yeah, nobody would dispute that.
So maybe some chilling on them would be a good thing. But yeah, it's difficult. I don't think it's a straightforward answer. My gut would be, I'm just saying this. I don't give a shit if you're a Trump supporter. Are you always imagine the person you least want, right? And so, like, if are you comfortable if Hillary Clinton would win in 2028, God forbid? Are you comfortable with her being allowed to do whatever she wants and you can never criminally prosecute her? I don't think so. Like, that, to me, it seems a bridge too far.
Last question. Are there any areas that you would consider leftist or liberal or democratic policy where you think that there's room for common ground?
Well, for me, I think that I see lefties that are against what they see as like corrupt establishment as well. So the lefties that suggest that, I would agree with. I think there are common ground issues. I mean, it's difficult to say because things.
Well, like for example, you work in healthcare, like home healthcare, right? So, what is your situation? And again, we don't have to get in the weeds, but I'm curious because this is one thing I've never heard you talk about. Like, on this specific policy, there would be at least some sort of common ground.
Well, that's a good example. So, like in common ground in that sense, right? Right. So here's how I would sell it to a Democrat, right? And this is obviously stereotyping, but the idea that you have people through no fault of their own have debilitating diseases like autism, they should be given a chance to have as much freedom as possible. And they should, like, literally, we should value them because they are productive members of society. And the old school way of just put them in a facility is egregious. And although there are certain people that maybe can't live in the community because the extent of their illness or because of criminal behavior, we should try to maximize that. To a Republican, I would make similar arguments. But what I'd also say is, in the long run, it'll be cheaper. Because what happens is, if you don't do this and you close down these facilities, which is happening, what happens is people end up on the street. And then you know what happens when someone has sort of developmental disabilities and are on the street? Well, they lead to crime, right? Because they're desperate. And then you have to pay more money for them in jail than you would if you just put them with some sort of facility. And again, it's not I know it's a cliche that like hard right-wingers will say, like, we need to open back up the mental asylums. I do think that there is room for saying that there are some people that we can't give that freedom, but I think it does a disservice that there's a lot of people that used to get shuffled. I mean, I could tell you, I have to be careful because of HIPAA, but I know people that were put in facilities. In my area, there was one called Polk, and Nancy Reagan visited Polk when Reagan was in office, and she was instrumental in sort of leading the fight against closing facilities like that. Like in Polk, one time they had a flood and bodies washed up because they only buried people like a foot deep. And so like, it was horrific. And what happened was you would have this facility where maybe you would have one staff for every 50 people, and you didn't know how to treat people with autism anyways. And people were like, schizophrenic or autistic and all this. What do you do if they start acting up? Strap them to the bed. And then what do you think that does? That makes the situation worse for the next time. And it's like a prison. So I could tell you stories of people that were in those facilities that, the best moment of my job was one person I worked for, we used to have to get regularly doctor appointments and injections, and the nurse retired that gave him the injection. And she told me that she knew that person from when he was in a facility like that. And she was scared to death of him. And when she saw him come in then, that was her favorite person that she saw. And that illustrates to me, that guy's not a monster. He was made a monster because you put him in a place where he had to fight for his life. And when you do that, what would you do? What would I do? You're going to fight back. And so,
Right.
that's one issue that I think prison reform's another one. I'm disgusted at the way that our prisons are run. The fact, I don't mind jokes, don't get me wrong, but the fact that prison rape is a joke because it's real is disgusting. I don't give a shit. If you want to change the law to say execute child predators, do this, that's fine. We can have a discussion about the law. But once you're in those facilities, there has to be a certain level of decency that's
And
for
care.
the people that are in there. And I think that the situation with our prisons is disgusting. And I think I can make good arguments on the left or the right. There are other things. I think border security should be an issue that people are concerned with on both sides. And but yeah, there's room.
So I don't follow. The last thing, it's not a question. Last thing I'll say is, obviously my most frequent interactions with you are over like Trump and Biden and impeachments and things like that. Do you you do stream regularly? What's your
Yeah. Almost
do it
3-4 nights a week, I would say. Yeah.
Gotcha. So how much, especially like heading into this election, like how much do you focus on policy? Because I know you ran for office, right? Obviously you have a policy background, but like in terms of your content, do you ever I don't know, do you ever
It's difficult.
nerd out over like a particular piece of legislation or things like that? Or
not
it's
so
what
much
people
recently.
want?
So I used to have a radio show and one of the things we tried to do was I take moderating very seriously, and we tried to get at the state and local levels people that were running against each other to come on and debate and to ask them policy questions. So I used to focus on that, particularly at the state and local level, the policies. I talk about some of the policies that I think are important, but I would say, honest to goodness, that it's probably a 15%. I would say the bulk of everything I'm talking about is what I see as corrupt double standards or things of that nature.
Fair. Okay. Well, listen, dude, I appreciate this. I do think it's fun sparring with you via text or face to face. Now that I'm doing this full time, I'm trying to live stream a bit more regularly and do these conversations instead of just pre-recorded content. The schedule didn't really allow for it prior to this. And I'm sure as we get closer to the election, if you're down for it, I would love to scream fuck yous at each other again, either on this topic or others as well, because the impeachment, obviously the serendipity, right? I didn't even think about this when we scheduled it, but the Hunter Biden deposition was done today. Comer says he's going to release the transcript in the next 72 hours or something like that. Sure, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of shit for us to bitch at each other about on Twitter and elsewhere. So, but buddy, I appreciate it. I know you think my politics suck. I think yours suck, but it's fun to brawl with you over this stuff and see where it goes. And good luck with that Tim Pool thing.
Yeah. I appreciate it. And if you could send me the MP4, that would be great. I do apologize. I really do. Look, I try to make all commitments that I make. It sucks sometimes because of the nature of this job that I get called in. So I do apologize. My computer went out and stuff. Hopefully it didn't ruin it for you or your audience. So.
No, you're good. You're good. Now the video quality on your side might be a little de-resed because there were connection issues, but I'll download the MP4 when I'm done streaming, probably in the next 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah, no hurry. Yeah.
And I'll send it to you. I think I'll need, if I send it through a Google Drive. Well, no, I can create a link. That's fine. I don't need your email address. I'll create a link and I'll send it to you.
I'll send you my email address. It's all right. So, all right. Thanks so much, man.
Hey, appreciate it, buddy.
Good luck
you have
with
a
your
good
channel. We'll see you.
Likewise. See, I'd grab a beer with that guy, even though I despise his politics. So I plan to stream for the next 20 minutes or so, take questions, comments, or concerns or anything like that. But yeah, Rob is the ultimate Biden Trump impeachment sort of guru on the right. Okay, he dedicates a considerable amount of time for it. He's like the anti-Pisco, right? Because Pisco does it from the left's perspective as well, and seeing them spar is always fun. And I like saying again, fuck you and everything on Twitter as well. Obviously, I disagree with basically everything he said in the final statement. I'm not going to rehash the whole thing because that would be unfair to him, giving him the final word. But I would encourage you to go back and look at the VOD if you're just now tuning in to see where he and I disagree on our final conclusions. So let's see here. Can't grab a beer with these conspiracy theorists. They need to be shamed. You can do both. Like I said, I think his politics suck. I make no bones about it. It was interesting to get his perspective on things outside the realm of what I would consider conspiracy theories and impeachment and things like that into more policy areas. In terms of grabbing a beer with him, again, I want to be very clear. You have to occupy dual roles in this. I despise the elected Republicans and conservative thought leaders in today's Republican Party. But if I did not have any sort of human connection with the conspiracy theorists and what I consider to be the MAGA cult, I would never talk to certain family members. Let me just say that, and certain friends as well. So these things can be true simultaneously. I can have affection for Rob as a human being because he's funny, and I like how boisterous and shrieky he gets. And he's clearly not an idiot. I do agree that he's a conspiracy theorist, but he's not an idiot. He's very, very smart. And so I'm sure there's plenty of things that we could talk about, maybe music or movies or whatever. So let's see. What else? Well, policies make me think I'm a Democrat. I assume, I don't know if you're talking to somebody in chat or talking to me. Wait a minute. What? Oh, Illinois judge removes Trump from insurrectionist ban. Holy shit, man. I mean, that will almost certainly die in SCOTUS. The oral arguments did not go great. I mean, even the liberal justices like Ketanji Brown Jackson, they did not seem to be interested in that. Trump, insurrectionist. Yeah. Well, that happened. Let's take a look. Wait a minute. What happens if I do this? There we go. In a surprise move, an Illinois judge has removed former President Donald Trump from the state's ballot based on the 14th Amendment's so-called insurrectionist ban. The decision is paused, giving Trump a short period of time to appeal. Wednesday's unexpected decision comes as a similar anti-Trump challenge from Colorado is pending before the U.S. Supreme Court. Cook County Judge Tracy Porter heavily relied on the prior finding by the Colorado Supreme Court, calling Colorado's rationale compelling. The court also realizes the magnitude of this decision and its impact on the upcoming primary Illinois elections. The Illinois State Board of Elections shall remove Donald J. Trump from the ballot for the general primary election on March 19th, 2024, or cause any votes cast for him to be suppressed. A retired Republican judge who was tapped by the election board to examine the matter held an evidentiary hearing and concluded that Trump should be barred from the ballot because he engaged in the January 6th insurrection. But he determined that only courts and not the board had the power to implement his recommendation. Yikes. But again, this will almost certainly not go anywhere. Bummed I missed the debate /convo. The VOD will be up, so you can definitely check it out in its entirety. Sorry if I came across a little strong to Rob supporters of 3 in chat ponder. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't paying attention, right? So I was trying to like look at these links that Rob was sending me in real time and also trying to find stuff to send to him to be able to look back as well in the multitasking. The pondering, you can just call me Josiah, by the way. What Democratic policies do you support? Economics, healthcare, housing, etc. Yeah, all of those. I mean, generally speaking, are certainly at least more of them than the Republican counterparts. So when it comes to economic policy, in terms of like the general principle, I believe in a robust welfare state, social safety nets, things like that. I believe in, as I was trying to explain to Brandon, oh, I'm just blanking on his name. Oh, Social Society with Brandon Clark. Yeah, a couple of days ago before the power went out. I believe that healthcare is a human right, and I want everyone in the United States to have ideally free healthcare, right? So Medicare for all would be ideal for me, but I also I didn't object to Pete Buttigieg's more moderate version of Medicare for all who want it. I don't give a shit as long as people have healthcare coverage that is either free or stupidly affordable. As somebody who had to watch his mother die because of stage 4 cancer, and she had to briefly worry about how she was going to pay for the treatment before, of course, she ended up going into hospice. Nobody should ever have to worry about that. So that's a big one for me. in terms of economics, again, like I believe in a progressive tax system. I think that the tax burden should be relatively imposed if there's going to be one, which obviously there always will be, on the rich, right? Number one, they can afford to take the hit. Number two, I don't believe that anybody is an island unto themselves. I don't believe in the pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. I think every rich person who's ever become rich in the United States benefited from, collective input into infrastructure, and things of that nature as well, public education. And again, even if none of that were true, even if none of that were true, at the end of the day, I think in order to keep a functioning society, you have to have a functioning government with social safety nets. So even if people did not owe at least some part of their wealth to the nation in which they live, I still think that it would be fine to take a portion of that, to help everybody else. So um, let's see. I appreciate that. Sorry to hear that. It's okay. It happened 6 years ago in October. She was very young. She was 49 years old when she died. She missed her birthday by 2 weeks. She would have been 50. Um, does communism work? I've never seen it work. Which, by the way, I guess it technically doesn't mean that it couldn't work, right? But we've attempted it before and it's not worked. And really, like even China, we call China communist China, but it's not. Its economy, which by the way is struggling right now, is not exactly a communist economy, right? So I've never seen economy work or communist economies work on a grand scale. Um, Cancel culture is also on the right, not the left. The right cancels. Yes, the right cancel culture. So funny. People, it's so weird to me. People seem to think that cancel culture is like the genesis of it was social media. But I'm old enough to remember that when popular country music groups would criticize President Bush during the war on terror, they would lose all of their, I don't know, their outreach or whatever, all like the music. That like radio stations across the country would pull them off. I remember that. That's cancel culture. I remember Bill Maher's first show, Real Time with Bill Maher. That was canceled, or not Real Time with Bill Maher, Politically Incorrect. That was also canceled because he criticized the Bush era military. So cancel culture happens all the time. They wanted to cancel the NFL. They wanted to cancel Target. They wanted to cancel Gillette, et cetera, and so forth. People have always, as individuals and as groups, wanted to leverage power and ostracize those who embody values that they believe are counterproductive to the rest of the group. Everybody's done it. Just social media has kind of magnified it. But if and when, I mean, you know, Twitter has actually, believe it or not, algorithmically had a bias for right wing accounts for years. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily nefarious. It could be just purely incidental as a result of what goes into generating impressions, right? Could be that right wing content is just so salacious enough that people are more drawn to it, even if they disagree with it vehemently. But algorithmically, conservative content on Twitter was always magnified. And then you have on Twitter now under Elon Musk, it's gotten considerably worse. This guy says there are no democratic policies that improve America. Democrat policies are why the country is being destroyed. Okay, buddy. uh, let's see. What else? Just going back back up the food chain. Um, Yeah, Trump ordered more drone strikes than Obama did, so don't give me that BS that Trump was peaceful. Again, I'm not sure. I don't know if Rob made that comment, but I assume like half of these comments you're talking to Chad anyway. But yeah, so Donald Trump, based on the limited evidence we had, was drone striking to unprecedented extents. And then on top of it, he also removed DoD policy, which required the DoD to document and publicize, I believe, records of drone strikes. So it's entirely possible that he drone struck a hell of a lot more than even we realize. President Biden reinstituted those policies when he was inaugurated, and drone strikes under Biden have reduced significantly. Who did Obama kill? Be specific with the details. Yeah, I don't remember offhand the person's name, but I believe he's an American citizen. in the Middle East who was killed in a drone strike because it wasn't like collateral damage. I think he was one of the targets because he was seen as a radical terrorist. And there were some questions about the legality of what Biden did, or excuse me, Obama did. But I don't think like murder is too strong a word. That has never been the case. But listen, my position has been from the beginning when people try to use this as a gotcha. Well, listen, if you don't make presidents absolutely immune from criminal prosecution, that means that subsequent justice departments or prosecutors could go after President Obama or President Biden when he leaves office eventually. I'm fine with that. If there's a case to be made, if there's a genuine case to be made against ex-presidents who are Democrats, that's fine. Make the case because there are also protections, as has been pointed out by the majority or the three-panel DC appellate court in their decision that presidents are not entitled to absolute legal immunity. There are protections against frivolous prosecution, right? And there are ways to seek remedy for that. Does Rob think capping insulin was a good thing? I expect he does. I don't want to speak for him. I should have asked that question. If I had been paying attention to chat, I would have. Sorry about that. Oh, I see that Aftershock was in here. That's Rob's lieutenant. Holy shit. I should have been paying more attention. Let's see. And then it looks like chat capped at 21,336.06. Let's see. I drink Bud Light because I like to watch the real snowflakes squeal. I'm not much of a Bud Light guy. But yeah, that's so funny. That's another thing that conservatives try to cancel. Fair enough. Conservatives do not understand they support a lot of socialist policies. Absolutely, old Scotty. Democrats consistently leave surplus and balanced budgets. Republicans consistently leave deficit and moral bankruptcy. I mean, Donald Trump added more to the deficit on his watch. It was $8 trillion, and it wasn't all from COVID relief. But yeah, absolutely. And he promised not only to not add, he promised to eliminate what was already there. Pondering politics. Any thoughts on the nationalization of all politics? Just saw a Tennessee politician's poster that said he was for border security, ending wokeness, and being pro-Trump. I don't know if you mean like Christian nationalism or what. Or maybe you mean federalizing things, like taking a lot of things out of like local constituencies. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but border security, again, the Democrats are for border security. Right now, we might prefer to do things much more humanely than the Trump administration, but nobody, not even Bernie Sanders, believes in literal open borders. They don't, nobody in the Democratic Party, in terms of its leadership, believes that borders, that sovereign states are not entitled to define and enforce their borders. It's just about what's effective and what's humane. What do you consider yourself? I've been trying to figure out what I am in the political landscape. An old, rich, white racist says I'm a socialist. I'm just for what you stand for, basically. It's funny because I hate when people say, "Oh, labels don't matter," because they do matter. There is utility in labels. But I will say, I've had, I don't know, a bit of a reconsideration because I've always considered myself progressive. Again, in the sense that, I am staunchly for LGBTQ rights. By the way, I mean, I even admitted this to the Vanguard, who I like, by the way. I haven't been able to catch any of their streams recently because I've been trying to focus on all this. But like, even like the moral case for reparations, I think that the moral case for reparations against African Americans and Native Americans is indisputable, right? But then of course the question becomes, well, how would you execute that in terms of policy? And that's very important, which is why I've not like endorsed a particular reparations policy. But the moral case, I think, is absolutely the case. I think all of these things are progressive. I think that, again, healthcare is a human right. I would absolutely support, like, you'd have to convince me that Medicare for all would just like cause the country to implode in economic ruin, because that's how much I believe healthcare is a human right. I believe in public education. I believe in reducing the military budget that our DoD cannot pass an audit and hasn't, I think, in the past like 10 years, blah, 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 all the things. But a lot of people, even people I think like the Vanguard who like me, I think the guys at the Vanguard, we all get along, but they would call me a liberal, right? Because I'm more focused I think that they think that I'm more willing to compromise my progressive values. Erin Straighterade, I imagine she would also call me a liberal as well, because they think I'm more willing to compromise more progressive policy things for the sake of getting Democrats reelected, right? Like I'm not, I don't believe in accelerationism. I will still vote for President Biden if he is the Democratic nominee, even though I live in North Carolina, right? But North Carolina, I think, is technically, I would consider it like close to a swing state. And I would encourage others to vote for President Biden as well. And so, in the eyes of many, I'm a liberal, right? Or because I don't hate Biden, right? I think Joe Biden has been, I think, objectively, and you can say that the standard sucks. You can say that what we're comparing him to is ridiculous, but Joe Biden has been, I think, an objectively good president. Mehdi Hassan thinks that too, and I think Mehdi Hassan's also progressive. So I don't know. Let's see here. Oh. I block Aftershock. Aftershock's fun. He blocked me once, I think, famously. But yeah, just all bluster. Yeah, I just mean on state and local level politics, it focuses on country level stuff. Local politics is focusing too much on national politics. Yeah, I mean, national politics is sexier, right? But you could easily make the case that in terms of your day to day life, local politics is more impactful. Um, That was a good debate. You two kept it civil. I enjoyed watching. We agree to disagree. Yeah, listen, again, so if you guys ever watch me on WIC panels, I can get pretty aggro, but I also like knowing that the person that I'm aggroing with can handle it. Rob Noerr early on, it was hard to pin him down because he obviously got very aggro, but we didn't have any sort of like prior relationship. So I couldn't tell if when he went aggro, he was just doing it for banter or because he generally hated my guts and genuinely hated my guts. I like to think now that there is again some sort of mild affection just on a human to human basis, that he too would go grab a beer with me, but because we think each other's politics suck, we don't mind getting in each other's faces. If you see me on WIC panels, I do it all the time with like Lactoid or Artemis Fowl or people like that. Sometimes it's genuine aggression, and other times it's like just me having to vent the aggression I build up covering day to day politics on a particular target. And it just so happens to be one of them. But yeah, obviously I do. I think his politics are terrible. I do think that he has not made the case at all that this is an impeachable offense against Joe Biden. But I think he's a smart guy, and it's fun sparring with him. Let's see. North Carolina is by far the most beautiful state I visited once and thought about moving multiple times. It's been awesome. I haven't been able to explore that much because, unfortunately, I've been landlocked. Basically, I feel like I live in Charlotte and just working multiple jobs, trying to get the shit off the ground. It's been pretty challenging. Let's see. Rob has me blocked on X because I call him on the double. I'm shocked that Rob would actually block somebody. I need to ask him about that. Rob, come on, stop it. What do you think of Rob's double standard of Burisma versus the Mueller probe as far as the evidence required? Yeah, I do think there's a double standard. He would say, no, I'm just trying to correct the double standard. But it seems to me that I understand wanting the same level, the same standard. And I think you can nitpick. I shouldn't say nitpick. I think you can legitimately quibble with certain prosecutorial decisions that were made. Like, for example, easy example. Let's take the recent special counsel report on President Biden, the Hur report. It's entirely possible that had a different prosecutor been chosen, right? And I'm sure Pisco would argue this. He's an attorney. That a different prosecutor might have made a different prosecuting decision, right? Maybe somebody else, maybe a John Durham, for example, maybe John Durham, if he had been in Hur's place, would have actually said, no, Joe Biden needs to be prosecuted once he leaves office. Some of this is kind of ambiguous, right? But yeah, I do think they're double standards. I think Rob's double standards are, and that's why I tried to ask, like, one of the questions was like, do you think that, um, is there any timeline? Do you support any, at least, of the investigations into Donald Trump? Um, Even if you don't agree with, like, even if you don't think he should be convicted, right? Even if you think he'd be exonerated and you wouldn't support a conviction, do you at least support looking into certain things? I was trying to get that out of him because I'd never heard him say, maybe he has, but I hadn't heard it. I'd never heard him say that he would support, certain things, but he gave an example. He's like the classified documents thing. But also I wanted to ask him if we had more time, but I wanted to like cover through chat and stuff like that as well. Would you support taking a look at Jared Kushner and the $2 billion um, from Saudi Arabia? So let's see. I'm an evil SOB from Rob's chat. We like you. You're a breath of fresh air in this arena. Iron sharpens iron. Hope your channel takes off. Much love. Linebacker, I appreciate that. Again, love sparring with Rob. It is something that I hope to do more now that this is my full-time job and I'm starting to stream more. I'm never going to be like a full-time live streamer, but I plan to do this once or twice a week. And hopefully, especially as we get to the election, there will be more time to challenge Rob. Again, I go grab a beer with him a second, even though I dread the world that he would create, even though I'm sure he has the best of intentions. Rob, let me finish means let me talk with 15 minutes without interruption. Again, just to be clear, towards the end, I promise I give him the last word because I needed to wrap this up so I could get to the other parts of the stream I wanted to do, like this Q&A. Like, folks, that's the other thing too. Like, one of the things that I want to do is have people pop in, not just like send messages here, but if any of you are comfortable, popping in for 20 minutes or 10 minutes or even 5 minutes, give comments, questions. If you want to debate something, if you have a disagreement that you want to air, it'd be fun. So I don't know how you agree to disagree. Maybe I'm just jaded, but I'm incapable of that. No tolerance for BS. I struggle with it. I struggle with it. Are you kidding me? I mean, probably in a day or so, I'll be busting Rob's balls again. He'll be busting mine again. I mean, it's one of those things where I can't. I mean, I grew up in rural Kentucky. I grew up surrounded by conservative family members and friends. That's all I've ever known. And so I have to, you know, um, I, I, I I just have to, right? If I literally, that's why people crack me up sometimes, like in the comments, like, "Wow, you really hate MAGA." No, I don't. I hate. I have enormous contempt for MAGA leaders, for elected Republicans, for conservative thought leaders, people who are in positions of power and who have wield enormous leverage and influence, and they victimize others. Like, if you go to Kentucky, Alabama, Mississippi, all these red states, what you will find is that conservatives are very often victims of the very party that they empower. I mean, it's one of the great tricks of all time, right? Where wealthy, the wealthy donor class of the Republican Party has convinced um, white, predominantly white, not always, obviously, but like white, poor um, people in West Virginia and Alabama and Mississippi to effectively be their cannon fodder. It's one of the just a spectacular con. Who do I wish was in the presidential race? Man, I don't know. Definitely not Donald Trump. I think President Biden has been a good president. I do question. I know it upsets a chat a lot. I do go back and forth over whether I think President Biden has what it takes to run in this environment, because I do think that they're two different disciplines. I think it's entirely possible, as unfair as it is, that you can have somebody who can do the job, who has done the job, who has done the job relatively well given what he was dealt, and not be in a position to persuasively convince people that he deserves the job, like almost seemingly in contradiction to one another. Like, my God, you look at that debate that Destiny had with Pierce Morgan the other day. They kept going, well, Trump is funny. He makes people laugh. It's like, and I'm glad Stephen called him out on it. Like, is that really what we're looking for in a president? I mean, it's a great plus, right? But yeah, I don't know. There's not, I really like this freshman roster of Democrats. I mean, I like the the AOC and Ilhan Omar and Jamie Raskin. I mean, different generations there, but like in terms of like politicians, I think have like gumption and spirit and have good policies and have the ferocity. I love Jared Moskowitz, um, uh, Garcia. I'm blanking on his name. Maxwell Frost is another one. I'd probably say Jamie Raskin. I think Jamie Raskin would be the one to do it for me. Forget Burisma versus Mueller. Mueller versus Durham proves the Durham. Yeah, the Durham thing was just a complete waste of time. I mean, it even concluded, yeah, that Trump should have been investigated. Just Durham just doesn't think it should have been a full on investigation. It should have been a preliminary investigation. I mean, if you want to hang on your hat on that, so be it. But Rob acknowledges very little of the Mueller report and will pivot away from as quick as possible. Yeah. So again, I wasn't going to debate him on the Mueller report either because I'd want to go brush up on that. See, there again, Rob, like he says, this is his area, right? Is keeping track of like the Durham report, the Mueller report, and whatever. Now, I am pretty conversant, I think, compared to most people, but like I don't have the Mueller report memorized. Are you kidding me? Like one thing that I'll probably like always have memorized relatively well, just because I can't explain it. It's probably the Afghanistan pullout, right? But like all this other stuff, I try to take notes and try to brush up on notes and try to keep things very specific. That's the challenge with Rob, is that Rob, whether some people would say he does it deliberately, I'm not even going to say that. I think it's possible, but Rob fractals off into like he goes down all this warren of rabbit holes. And again, Pisco is willing to chase him down those. Steven Destiny doesn't seem to do it anymore. I try to do it even less. I used to be like Pisco in the sense I was willing to chase Rob down these things. But then he'd refer to this, this document from 2018. Did you know about this Inspector General's report from 2018 or page 3 on the Inspector General's report from 2018? I'm like, maybe, fuck, I don't know. And so it becomes a whole thing. That's why I try to do very specific parameters. Let's see. This person acts like they have an actual point by saying they believe in facts while spewing lies about the border. Not sure who you're talking to, but let me know. Do you think MTG will get removed from public office for providing support to insurrectionists because of the 14th Amendment? No. I think that, I suppose they could. I'm blanking on the guy's name. Colby, Coy, something like that. Coy Pond. I can't remember, but somebody was county commissioner out in the Midwest and he was taken out of office. He was just ripped out by a judge's order to vacate. Have you looked at possible McConnell replacements yet? No, because he's not resigning from office, right? He's just not going to seek re-election. It's funny. He played dirty pool too. When it looked like when his hands and shit were going necrotic, he convinced the supermajority, the Republican supermajority in the Kentucky State Assembly, to pass a bill that would force any governor, but Democratic Governor Beshear, to pick from a list of Republican-approved candidates in the event that the incumbent was unable to fulfill his term, right? Because they suspected that McConnell might croak while in office, and they didn't want to give Andy Beshear the opportunity to throw a Democrat in. So, but there's a question over whether or not that's constitutional. So, Red Team Review. Hey, what's up, man? You do the Game of Thrones stuff. We need to talk sometime. You can jump in right now if you're listening. I find it insane that Republicans never actually catered to the Hispanic Latino community because they're very conservative. I would know. I'm Latino myself, born in South America. It's very much similar. Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of like conservative religiosity in the Latino community as well. Like if the Republican Party, because I'm not going to say all Republicans, but the Republican Party would just stop being so friggin' racist and insane, it would behoove them to do that. Jared Costner, Jared Kushner, $2 billion, or Jared. I think you meant Jared Jared Kushner got $2 billion from Saudi Arabia. Yes. No. Again, that's something that eventually I'd love to talk with Rob about. But again, I've tried to keep it. My understanding based on the conversation was again, I mean, like I've got the just be clear here. Let me pull it up. About as well as the Biden impeachment. Biden impeachment is going for MAGA. It's actually going good if you pay attention. The CHS not looking great. But just a day or so, a business partner of James and Hunter Biden admitted Biden was involved in business deals. I said, yeah, they dropped the transcript today, which Bob Alinsky, I plan to check it out. Haven't had a chance to check it out. The last bombshell was Devon Archer, and that one was a spectacular misfire, so I'm tempering expectations. Link, by the way. Archer wasn't a misfire, it's also pretty damning. I'd happily debate you on it if you like. So again, my understanding was based on the context that he was making the case that it was damning in the sense of the impeachment, not on anything else, double standards or whatever else. So that's why I framed it the way I did. Jasmine Crockett is awesome. She is. She really is. She's awesome. Jasmine Crockett is queen. Yes, she is. More queen than Beyonce. Move over, Beyonce. By the way, that song, Texas Hold'em, not very good. Did not like it. Let's see. Jasmine Crockett is awesome. I'll probably make what's a good place to start if you want to read up on Burisma and stuff besides Wikipedia. I mean, Wikipedia is a good place to start because it collates data, usually has hyperlinks and everything else. But the various like official reports, there was a 2019-2020 Republican Senate report on the matter. There was the minority report on the matter. You have the various transcripts of all the depositions here. You have the indictment or I guess it's not really related, right? Because it was about tax and the gun charge. But yeah, I would go to government documents first. Jamie Raskin and the oversight Democrats, they've put out memo after memo after memo. Ian Sams from the White House, I would check there. Josiah, really enjoyed your debate performance. Definitely excited to see more. I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Like I said, it's fun to spar with Rob. If you auto mod me, I leave. Enjoy your echo chamber. I don't think anybody auto mod you. Calm down, bro. Chill. I can still see Sky's comments on my screen. Block him. Block him if you don't want to see it. But if he's like breaking the rules here. Oh, sorry, Josiah. I was referring to someone in chat. I absolutely love every single video you produce. Appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, this is good. Biden's doctor said he's fit and healthy. Let's check that out. So I think I'm not seeing any more questions or comments. Pondering, remove the underscore in your YouTube link. Oh, I should check that out. I'm sorry about that. Thank you. Just wanted to say thank you for Chano. You've been very refreshing and very informing. Please keep it up. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm going to wrap it up here in about 6 minutes, make it 10:30. Again, Kelly Lynn, what's the best way to reach you? Seems like you may need a mod or two. I've been around for a while. Email would be great. Right. Like I said, guys, it's been intense. Like I usually put out 3 videos a day, but for the past 2 weeks, it's been like shit. Well, 8 days, 9 days, 2 videos a day. Like it's a lot. It's a lot of prep. So I don't script, right? I speak contemporaneously I try not to do jump cuts and things like that too. So if I get 7 minutes deep into a thing and I spectacularly screw up, I have a Biden moment, I have a Trump moment, I start talking about magnets, then I start over again, right? So you find the things you want to talk about, you do the commensurate research to have background because I just don't read the articles contemporaneously. I try to if I have a video topic, be it about the economy or Biden's impeachment or whatever it is, I try to pair it with additional sources as well. So you're going through other sources as well because you don't want to talk about a single story. You want to talk about a or a particular event, you're talking about like multiple things from multiple angles with a single like through line. So I do all the research, I do the recording, I do all the editing, and then I do the upload and SEO and the thumbnail and everything else. It's a lot. It's a lot. Wait, what did Cannon do? Why is Judge Cannon making the correct decisions all of a sudden? So you're referring to Judge Aileen Cannon, the one presiding over the documents case? What did she do? What am I missing? What's going on? It's crazy that you're not scripted. You come off so professional as if you were scripted. You'll find. I mean, that's probably. I've been busted with fact checks on times I've misspoken. Like I'll get an easy example jumped out at me. The other day, I covered Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC. Made a pretty compelling refutation of the idea that Joe Biden is not, again, fit to be president. And I referred to him as a former congressman. And that was because I genuinely thought he was. But I misremembered my Lawrence O'Donnell lore, which is that he was a congressional staffer, not a congressperson. But I said it because it wasn't scripted, right? So that the fact check was there. You're a great voice for the left in the online space. Hope to see you succeeding. I appreciate that. You have an actual background in public speaking outside of online stuff? No, I've just not shy. But like the closest I've come to like an actual background in terms of like I did like improvisational comedy in high school, believe it or not. Came in first in state, but it was Kentucky. So comedy there, not so great. I kid. When we get to interview Jessica Tarlov wanting this so bad, yeah, me too. I love her. I think she has the toughest job in mainstream politics as somebody who has to duel four of the griftiest, most bad faith, but polished, right? It's not like they're novices. I think they're experienced, Pirro and Waters and everybody else in right-wing politics. So, and she kicks butt. Have you been to the doctor? That cough is hanging on too long. So my roommate, Jordan, he also had a cough after having COVID that stayed with him for like 3 weeks. And it's the same thing for me. I don't know, man. It's, I probably need like 48 hours of rest and like an IV bag and try to get back into the gym. That's the other thing I'm trying to do, trying to have a life, get back into shape and everything else. But yeah, 2 minutes, anything else, 2 minutes. This VOD will be up. So you guys can go back and relive the greatest hits. Yeah, I'm going to be done in 2 minutes. Then I'm like, so like, I have a ceiling fan here, but I keep it off because I'm worried to like pick up the mic. I have this damn key light, which is the size of the sun, and I'm just cooking in here. The door is shut. That way my roommate doesn't have to pretend like he's in a library. So it's just, it's a lot. I'm cooking, baby. What do you want to do with your Twitch channel? Honestly, I haven't touched that thing in forever, which is apparently why the damn link is broken. Probably need to do that. Hi, Vincent. Can I keep on keeping the peace? Yeah. All right. Sag? Is that like a sad badge? Anything else? Chef Josiah going to make an appearance. So, Lycan, good guy. Like Lycan. It's funny. And having had a chance to meet him multiple, as a matter of fact, he and obviously got to see him at the Ohio canvassing event. And then he and Aaron stopped back by Charlotte on their way down to where they live. And so we got a chance to have dinner. He's fun to hang out with. He's really fun. I've got a girlfriend, but if I didn't have a girlfriend, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I always tell Erin all the time that she needs to worry about that the romance will trump the romance. I wish I would have known you was live. Yeah. So again, I try to schedule these things. I try to give like warnings on my YouTube page, like in the community post. So it's gonna be once, twice a week. I'm trying to put something together with Pisco and Akana Boy and somebody else to have like a regular thing during the 2024 elections. But yeah. Well, folks, I really appreciate it. I appreciate you jumping in. I appreciate you engaging. I appreciate you sparring with Rob's fans and the trolls. I appreciate some of the kind comments from Rob's audience. Appreciate you, Rob. And I love the questions. Again, anytime you all want to jump in and have a conversation, it probably won't be for the whole time, or air a disagreement or anything like that, just hit me up and we'll make that happen. So I appreciate it. Nelly, what did Nelly say? Pisco, no, was not in here. Pisco was MIA all today. Have not heard from him. So would you consider video of Ben Mycelis? I sure would. Call to action. Click the subscribe notification bell below. Yes, please like, subscribe, and everything else. I appreciate everybody. Thank you so much. And there'll be videos tomorrow.